All right, so welcome. We are going to call the meeting to order at 1:11 due to technical difficulties. But we are up and running now. Your agenda is in front of you. This is the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee meeting. And today is June 9th of 2023. So we do have quorum. So we can continue conducting our business. Is everyone okay to, as we always do, allow the recording of the meeting?
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. We're gonna do the quick little introduction, in case this is somebody's first time to see our wonderful committee. My name is Laura Pandratz. I am the chairperson, and I'm gonna introduce the next one.
Bob Hilligus, committee member.
Keith Kaiser, committee member.
Augie,
August Flengy, member of the committee. Online.
and our fifth member, Pam, is excused. Because she is out of town, so she may try and join us virtually. I'll keep an eye out. We'll keep an eye out. Let her in if we see her. But if not, she is excused. And then our board liaison
Steve Jacobs, board liaison.
and our guest today.
Jim Trumbull, association member.
Okay, and past committee chair for a year. So I like to add that because, there's a lot of validation there. Everybody take a quick peek at the agenda. I know we're probably going to adjust it a little bit, but basically, are you all okay with the agenda as presented?
I am.
Like I said, I forgot to print it,
Yes.
so I didn't have a copy up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everybody's fine with that? Okay. Next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was held May 12th. Is there any corrections or anything? Did you?
I had a question regarding Augie's comments.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Has that been clarified, Augie?
I haven't heard if we were going to attach the email related to the assessment report required by F04. So that someone mentioned there was an email about it and talked about it, attaching it to the minutes. I don't know if it's necessary, but that's why I put the question out there.
Does anybody recall that one, that issue?
Well, I mean, it's my email. I offered the email.
Oh, you are.
And this was based, basically, the email basically says that the board considered, my recollection was a charging document. I don't think it was the first reading. Considered the charging document, and there no further, they considered what the committee asked. No further action was going to be taken, and that was it. And as far as from the board's point of view, they're done considering FC04.
Okay. Yeah, my note here says that it was completed and it doesn't need a first reading then, right? Okay,
As far as the board's concerned,
So why don't we hold
and
it?
that's how I updated the charter.
okay.
So why don't you just eliminate the sentence and approve the meeting, the minutes as printed?
Okay. Did you hear that, Augie, then? We'll take that sentence out of the minutes completely.
I can remove it, and then I'll send it to you after our meeting.
That's a new one. Okay, all right. Was there anything
In
else
final.
in the minutes that we needed to look at?
Not from my perspective.
I read through them. I would approve them as written
Okay,
with that sentence removed.
Agreed.
okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended with removal of the one sentence up top, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. So then Augie, when you get a chance, you send me a clean copy of that and we can get that posted to the website then, for everybody. Okay. Next on the agenda is public comments. Do you have any at the moment? Okay. All right, at this point, we are going to rescind the Roberts Rules of Orders for the rest of the meeting unless we need to vote on something, and then it will be reinstated. That will allow all of us to have the opportunity to participate in the conversations. All right, next up is Chairperson's Report, which my list is getting a little bit smaller. I did watch the replay of the May 20th directors meeting. I did send the email to the Budget and Finance Committee chairperson, and it was also CC'd to our board liaison as well as their board liaison. It was sent originally on May 22nd, asking about that. The unnamed F resolution that's in the book, but not, and on the website, but not really an official resolution. It's not numbered, it's not named, you know. We were asking them to let us know the status of it, and if it's supposed to be a resolution, then we should probably make it a formal process to give it a name and number, you know. Because at the end of our last meeting, I did stop on the way out and spoke with Linda Martin. She pulled out the actual book and it was in there, but it's not the full signed off form like we normally would have. There was only like 2 signatures on it and it wasn't the full like board and all the way down our the committee and all of that.
So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't have been put in there then.
And it shouldn't be on the website, which is what I was asking, but nobody has clarified on the budget and finance end if it's, you know, is that procedural, all right? Or if it was, is it supposed to be there? And if it is, then we should number it. Now,
If it was there, it would have been
we
assigned a resolution.
kind of gave
reviewed
it
by the committee.
a letter and a number ourselves, right?
Well, yeah. I
The
just gave it-
only issue with that is, and I believe maybe you and I were talking about it, but there was a former F05 that had been rescinded. So maybe we should pick a different, you know, go to the next number after that, so that if that particular one is ever re-adopted in, it has its.
No,
you know,
I understand. I just,
yeah,
I
and
think-
and for us, we wouldn't have known that unless I had looked at the book and she had a tab for an F05, but that's not what this one is, you know what I mean?
The reason that came about is we were working with Keith to make sure the resolutions that he had on that form were consistent
Right.
with what's in the book of resolutions. And that's where I ran across it for the first time.
Right.
Now, the question to me is real simple. If it's supposed to be a resolution, put it in the right form and let the board go through the readings and put it in the book where it belongs. Or it doesn't exist, it's
Or
a
if-
memo.
Or if it's a procedural or operational one, then it needs to go somewhere else, but not in the book of resolutions, right?
I would think somebody needs to take it out.
Right. So.
Somebody
we don't
needs to
have the
remove it.
Authority of it, but, I don't
Can I
believe.
make an observation? My recollection is that when this came up, there was some discussion among the board, at the board meeting, let's say 2 months or 3 months ago, I don't remember which, as to whether this was a policy matter or it was an operations
Right.
matter. The consensus was that it was a policy matter. I'm not sure I agree with it, but there was no formal vote. My view would be we should take another crack at having budget and finance tell us, you view this as a policy matter or as an operational matter? And if it's a policy matter, whose responsibility is it? Is it the board's responsibility or does it fall to the committee? I don't know which. I tend to think it would be the board, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, at that point, if they believe it to be policy, I think at that point, we just take the text, put it in the form of a resolution, set it up for a first reading and move it through the process.
Did we do that process for them and for you?
Yeah, well,
and then send it?
I mean, we probably know how to do it and they may not. I don't know, but I don't.
Mhm.
Who does it, I think, is less important to me than
Mhm.
we getting a resolution. And so rather than just sort of taking it out or just,
Mhm.
let's get an answer as to whether or not this is policy or operations. If it's policy, let's just cut a form and get the first reading done. But it's gonna go over to the next board anyway.
Yeah, but what Doug said at that meeting, he told the general manager to review it and let him know, and nobody ever got back.
On this one, I thought,
He, at the board meeting, when you
When it
guys.
came up.
When it came up, he said he wasn't sure which it was, and he told the general
Okay.
manager
all right,
to let him know. Because
I'll call John.
the reason I'm asking that question is it's a simple statement that appears now on every bill that goes out for your assessment. It tells you got the option and this is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's already published. If that isn't part of a procedure that they're using, I don't know what would be.
Yeah.
So it's hardly a policy, it's a procedure.
But either way, I need a response.
Pardon me?
You know, somebody
Well-
should acknowledge, and
Oh, convenience fee, right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and whoever puts stuff in the official book
right,
needs to know that if they receive something
that's not complete.
that has not been signed off in accordance with our own rules, they shouldn't stick it in there.
Well, again, if I had a guess, this is just my guess, this was done prior to John and Linda.
Oh, yeah.
handling this matter,
Mm.
and it would, whenever the board passed it, they entitled it as a resolution, and so it got crammed in there. I mean, I think that's all, I mean, you know, I agree with you, I mean, and I think we've tightened things up a bit, but I'm guessing that's probably what happened.
Yeah. I think
All right.
just,
So.
I'll call John and talk to him, and if he says, you know, it's operational, then, you know, I'll report back to the committee and
Okay,
I'll just ask him to make sure it comes out of the book of
so for
resolutions.
clarification, of my future task, do I need to send that email again out to Budget and Finance, also?
Whatever you, if you wanna
or-
give him a second bite of the apple, go ahead. And then
Okay.
you and I
And I'll
can
see.
commiserate about it, but that's.
But you're gonna follow up with the GM.
I'll talk to John. I'll give him a call.
And I did email Michelle Ross about the posting our agenda for today to the website and to get the Teams link for our meeting. So I will not be able to attend the upcoming directors meeting on June 17th in person because I will be working at that time, so I will watch the replay. If anybody else wants to be there, in person, that would be great.
I'm probably there.
And then.
I was at a wedding last time, but-
There's one more.
which is
director's
more
meeting.
interesting.
So let me go back up. It is, next on the agenda is our board liaisons report. So is there anything extra you would like to report for us, Steve?
Yeah, let me touch on a couple of things. One is it applies to, and I mentioned this to Laura this morning when we got a chance to talk. Under new business where it says, resolution B08 dealing with board ethics. Just to bring you up to date, Colette and I have drafted a resolution that we will bring to the board at the June board meeting for a first reading. We both are quite sure this is almost certainly going to get referred to council. And I will ask at that time to make sure that the committee gets a bite at it as well. But there's really, at this point, I would say to you, there's really nothing to discuss. One way or the other, as you know, the board's charge is primarily to make sure that when you review the resolution, it's consistent with our governing documents. Offhand, I don't think there's a problem with that. But we can discuss that at the next meeting. And and I'm fairly certain, by the way, that resolution will probably go past the expiration of this board, and well, if it's gonna get considered, it'll be considered by the next board. I may be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what's gonna transpire. So anyway, I would bring that up. The other issue I would raise involves the discussion about the lost sentences, if you will, in the attachment A to M06 in paragraphs 11A and B that both Jim and Bob had called to our attention. And I think I sent everybody, an email. I went back through both the 2020 board documents and the minutes, as well as the 2022 minutes and board documents, and I talked to Jim late yesterday. What, as near as I can determine, those two sentences were added in 2020. There were amendments to attachment A in 2022, none of which touch those two paragraphs of the attachment. And so therefore they should have never been taken out. And the best guess I have is either some sort of clerical error, whether it was in preparation of the document, formatting, whatever it was, it inadvertently got dropped off. Linda, I also emailed Linda about this. She agreed, as Bob had pointed out, that the language was in the 2020 attachment, but not in the 2022 attachment. But there's no evidence anybody ever tried to take it out of the 2020. In other words, it should have stayed in there. I then spoke to Doug about this. He is in agreement with how we sort of looked at this. And I sent him both the site and the exact wording of the sentences and asked that it could be put back into the attachment. It should appear in the attachment when M06 comes up at the in May board meeting. June board meeting.
June board meeting.
The one next week, whatever that is.
June 17th.
Yeah, at the next board meeting. So I think we resolved the problem, and I don't think there's any further action. So I just wanted to bring that out.
Jim has a question.
When you and I talked, I guess yesterday, I mentioned the increased line spacing. You go back to the copy from February 2020 that Laura circulated in her agenda and materials message that shows an increased line spacing in the complete text of the resolution. The current document on the website does not have that increased line spacing. So what has apparently happened is that when the 2022 last year edition for electronic voting was made, however that was done, went back to a version earlier than 2020. And what you have now, if there's going to be an amendment to M06, what they should do is go back to that 2020 version and then add everything since then, 2022 and 2023, assuming there is a 2023 amendment of one kind or another. But what should be done is go back to that February 2020 version and make not corrections, but additions that occurred, approved additions after 2020.
Use that as your original,
Yeah,
your starting point.
Continue with the increased line spacing that occurred in 2020. Because the clear difference between what was approved in 2020 and what's on the website now, which includes 2022, the clear difference. And what has happened is somebody went back before 2020 and used that version to update with the 2022 version, 22 amendment. I mean, rattled on there. I hope I'm understood.
Yeah,
But what has to be done, I say has to be done, should be done, is get that 2020 version. I don't know where you got that from. I don't have the,
I typed it in my file, so someday I have it.
I couldn't find it in mine.
Well,
But that's the starting point for taking care of the situation.
yeah,
Let's go back to 2020 and then add in the electronic voting from last year and anything else is amended this coming
can you
couple
pull
meetings.
MO6 up there?
Mhm.
Because.
You want me, we're still technically under his report. Do you want me
Oh,
to
okay.
hold off
Oh, okay.
and we'll get through?
Well, I was
Senate
trying to-
And then pull it up or?
My question is that if I look at the one you send out that had it in, it's on a different page number in attachment A.
That's because.
2 or 3 page, yeah, with the
That's
double
right.
and it's now single space.
Yeah.
But, you know, so what other changes were made that weren't included? That's the question.
That's why you have to go, that's why you have to start with 20.
Right.
yeah, I actually brought one of my 2 versions of the attachment with me.
All right.
I'm not sure
yeah,
which
the
one,
I have
but-
up there now is the 20.
Okay, now go to attachment A, paragraph 11.
I guess what I'm saying is, I don't even know if the font is different, for argument's sake.
Oh, the font isn't different, but the
But
lines.
to me, that's just formatting,
Oh, yeah, that's.
and so, and that's,
Mhm.
I get what you're
Since you
saying.
get to page 11, an item number 11.
My review
See
was
what the
only
page
just to
number
make
is.
sure that no one had changed the language in A11A and B
Correction or-
that would have struck that sentence out.
It should
And
be
so that's why I think
attached.
it's just
It should be
clarifying. So
attachment
I
A.
will,
Are
I'll
you
raise that
attachment
with,
Here's the top.
Linda and John as to
Here's the
making
top.
sure that whatever changes transpire should be entered into the
4,
2020 version, which captures both 2022 and whatever happens next week.
6.
5 should be election
That's what I was gonna
contractor,
say.
right?
20 version.
And 6 should
2020.
be
2020
balloting process.
Does not, then you gotta add 2022,
Two, right,
And
and
these
tomorrow
things,
and next
yeah.
week's, right.
then you're up to date.
Right, I got you, okay.
See, it's the attachment.
If that, there's no, that's all I have. I
Okay,
think.
yeah, okay.
Well, wait, oh, no, I take, okay, here's a top.
Yeah, there's the attachment. I go down to 11. I mean, Jim's right, because if there were changes made, they could have also been dropped.
Yeah, you don't know what's happened. You
It could be something else, no.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
go with what's on the
Yeah,
website
'cause-
now and modify it.
Yeah.
You may be missing something else, because you don't know where.
See if you get to
Where it came
11.
from.
Are you at 11? What page was
Oh,
11?
you just passed it.
Attachment A, it should be.
It's attached.
Go back now, you're close to it.
Go back.
What? Well, this is page 11 now.
No, that's
paragraph
B, you're in
11.
B.
Oh, you want.
Paragraph 11,
Paragraph 11, yeah.
and on
Scroll up.
attachment A, all right.
Oh. I got it.
11 is the last one.
That's on page 9,
You go,
right here.
here's 12, that's 12, a little more,
Oh.
right there.
My screen doesn't move as fast as the other, the one up there, so. Sorry.
Then go to page 10.
Scroll down just a little. There you go.
The
Yeah,
part
there's
of-
11 and B where it's missing now.
Yeah, so that sentence is there, the act of presenting the election results. That sentence is there, but that's,
What's missing is, Jim, the sentence that we put in when we modified that resolution, or when it was approved by the board. Right?
well, in this version, it's there.
That's the 2020 version.
Right,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
In this version, it's there. But in the, again, whatever happened in 2022. Whatever the
It was-
formatting dropped it off by accident, so
Right,
I'll talk to Linda about getting this fixed.
okay. So we don't need to do anything on that then. You'll take care of it.
Right, I think I believe the issue's been resolved,
Okay,
pending everybody's ability to edit and insert a document.
Okay, so then under, thank you for that report. Under unfinished business status updates, these are just the few that I left here. That F-05 is technically the unnamed one. It's no response from the Budget and Finance Committee Chair. N09 is the one, Keith, that you had said you would work on, but we'll table that.
Yes, please.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, I know C10 I left on there because it's been overdue, but I need to figure out who to contact for the executive work group. I haven't done anything on that one. And M07 was that's the one that I think we had the big discussion where it was the one that, had the depth information in it, yeah,
Dredging of the
for
canals.
all of that. And we were gonna recommend that the directors acknowledge it, but if there was no, because it's that when our other guest, Latham John, I think was here from
Yeah,
Marine.
he's on the Marine.
Yeah, he was on the Marine
Activities
Committee.
yeah.
He said that they had been looking at that, but we all talked about, you can't remove those specifics out of there because we're grandfathered in or whatever with the state and all of that stuff. I don't fully all,
I
know
think,
all of that
if
stuff,
I may, I think the concern was that if if the resolution suggested a change in the dredging depths in any way, we would then start to have to engage in a process with Maryland Environmental Affairs and probably the Army Corps of Engineers,
Right.
which is 2+ years of a lot of heartache, which nobody really wants to do. And nobody's raising the issue anyway. I will tell you that I probably will be preparing yet another email to send to this committee saying that the board had received the charging document regarding M07 and is not taking any further action and considers the matter closed for the purposes of the governance document. I haven't sent it yet, but I will. That is the next step. So, because no one's going to do anything.
Yeah.
It's going to be been considered, it's been taken care of.
Yeah, you don't want to
Changes.
mess with trying to change the depth of anything right now because you got the county, you got the state, and you got the federal government
Right.
involved,
Right.
and you're not going to get it through.
That's effectively, not effectively, literally the action that was taken at the end of the last board meeting. M0's finished, moving on.
Yeah.
Right. I brought up the charging document, which we had discussed at our last meeting
Mhm.
for the board to consider, and the board did. And there was really no consideration, no discussion about it at all. Just came up and went away like a mist of smoke.
Effective the last meeting, it's been reviewed.
Right. And I'll send an email to this committee telling them that. Yeah. Just like I did with the other email that we were discussing.
Interim password, I'm just closing it out.
What?
Well,
I think they're missing
Teams,
something,
well, Teams is a Microsoft.
Is he still on? Augie, you still there?
yeah, you
Yeah,
said.
I'm here.
Okay.
I can see.
It
Okay.
just keeps popping up that thing, but it's in front of our screen, so
Oh, okay.
I don't, in our recording, it shows up.
I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that, so maybe it's not showing up in the recording.
That's why I think it's for that laptop. I think
Yeah.
it's that laptop messing
It
around.
looks normal to me. I just see the
You just see the
agenda
agenda?
and then you guys on a small window.
Or do you see the little password thing you pop
You
up?
don't see the Microsoft password entering on
No.
yours?
No, I don't see that.
All right, well, just, if it keeps popping up, until somebody knocks on the door and says, leave it alone, we're gonna keep closing it out, because then we can't see the screen.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Okay.
All right,
So anyway, that one's closed deal. You're going to take care of this stuff. Okay,
so we're
good.
good with that? Okay, so then under new business, as Steve stated earlier, we can take, we don't need to have a discussion on the B08 today, correct? Right?
That's correct.
Because we will wait and see, if it comes back to us after council's looked at it or whatever. And you have a new
It
proposed,
should come back to the committee. I don't think the board will have any problem with this, but it should come back to the committee after the first reading.
right, yeah.
It'll also be sent to council after the first reading, but
Right, okay. And then, officially now, is there anything else that we need to discuss with M06? Is there still anything outstanding on that?
M06, yeah, thank you.
well,
I thought we had to talk about the new proposed red lines.
right, and just to,
So,
here's where we are, I think. Regarding M06, there was a first reading at the May board meeting, dealing with recount procedures. Which,
is that this?
no, no,
Oh,
that's the one when you and I talked, I
uh-huh.
said you need to pull it out of the board packet from the May meeting.
Right,
Okay.
okay.
And then the second thing, which was circulated to the committee, to the board, is this red line version dealing with section 9 of attachment A, I believe. I think that's right. It's not really cited.
So this should, I cut that, yeah, I just cut it and put it into its own document so that I could, make it into a PDF here, so.
Right, and the suggested red line amendments to section 9 of attachment A is reflected, it reflects the fact that we have a different contractor dealing with the election who is based out in near Seattle, Bainbridge Island, I believe.
Yeah,
In Washington. There is no way that either they're gonna come to us or we're gonna send people out to them to supervise the counting of the ballots and other activities related to section 9. So that's why that's on there.
So
there's,
relative to this, the bylaws language
section 503, right?
that I sent out.
I have one more than two. Here's,
Do you have what I sent out?
yeah, I have, in fact, you want to read it? You can read
Yeah,
it right
so. Our position is to try to determine if we're violating anything that's currently standing. And so my only question is, the bylaw says that the election committee shall supervise the procedures for safeguarding and tabulating ballots. So, the word supervise being a verb, I think it's a valid question. How are they supervising something that's not only done by a subcontractor, but it's done by somebody on the other side of the continent?
Yeah, they're gonna send somebody on a plane to validate it, so
No.
they're there. Well, then the question, there's that question, and then the conflicting one is if you pull up section 3.04 of the declaration, it says voting procedures shall be established by a board of directors resolution. So can the board of directors by resolution change the bylaws?
That's in the declaration?
That's in the bylaws, that statement.
That statement is in the bylaws?
Yeah, but the statement in the bylaw, yeah, it's section 304 of the bylaws. You pull up the bylaws and go to section 3.
Well, I guess maybe you could argue that the way the board did that was by tasking in this other section, the election committee to do it.
Yeah.
So in other words, if that section of the bylaws says the
It,
board's responsible for doing this,
it's
and
a,
then the way the board did it was by saying, okay, election committee, you're responsible for this on our behalf to take care of this, then it would seem to me if the board was gonna undo that, the first thing it would have to do is relieve the election committee from the responsibility of having to do that.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up because those are two sections
What section?
in the bylaws that conflict in
Potentially
their
conflict,
own, and
right.
now with what you're wanting to change, because it's pretty clear what they're saying is it has to be, shall be supervised by a committee member.
Well, by the committee members, but I'm not sure I see a conflict. What I
Okay.
do see a problem with is the red line language in section 9 and the provision in the bylaws, because the bylaws say that the committee shall supervise
Yes,
the counting and the whatever.
What section?
Well, it says a bunch of things.
no, is that,
It says,
It's two tasks.
shall supervise printing,
Yeah,
mailing, and procedures for safeguarding and tabulating. So shall supervise printing, comma,
Right.
mailing, comma, and procedures for safeguarding and tabulating.
right. And what the amendment to section 9 does is simply say that the responsibility to count the ballots
Tabulating,
would be delegated to an independent contractor hired, and you can then observe what takes place in a hybrid function, because the original language basically it's, I think, clearly said you had to be on the premises. So that,
does this say maybe the committee itself or may delegate the responsibility? Yeah, so.
Would
committee
it,
would
would it be
too.
better, if it said clearly that the elections committee will supervise that operation? It's that the contractors, whatever they're doing to count or validate?
yeah, it probably would. What I would say to you is the language that's in front of you, or was on the red line version amending section 9, was drafted by council. And that's what, and so I don't know offhand how welcome they would be to any particular friendly amendment. I mean, I can sort of, I'd be happy to ruminate about that a little bit.
Well,
I don't have an answer, but I still see the conflict though between this and the bylaws. I mean,
if I, as your boss, say, I'm making you responsible for this, and you go, okay, I got it. And then you go to Bob and say, hey, you're responsible for this. And then I come back to you and you go, oh, no, I made Bob responsible for it. And I say, oh, no, I made you responsible for it.
Yeah.
So you may have the power to delegate it to somebody else, but you're still ultimately responsible for it. So it just seems like there needs to be some sort of language tweak that says, something to the effect of, while not, abdicating responsibility for supervision, the committee may delegate, certain responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. But I think it needs to make it clear that they're still responsible. Even if we send this to the other side of the continent,
Yeah.
the elections committee is still responsible for it.
yeah, I think, look,
If-
why is this language in there? Language is in there because the previous language in that attachment basically
on site.
required all the activity to be on site, for lack of a better term,
Right.
or to be local, if you prefer.
right.
When the elections committee and the board subsequently turned around and said, no, we're gonna leave this, we're gonna kick all this over to this company in Bainbridge Island. They had to change the attachment in order to let them do it. I mean,
So does this remove the on-site language?
it allows for it to be done in a hybrid, by remotely, by hybrid, online, whatever term you want to use. Yes.
Because it seems like the simple way would have just been to remove the on-site language.
Well, I don't think you could do that because you still had the basic responsibility existed with the elections committee. So then that language was drafted. No one contemplated kicking this over to a company on the other side of the country. They had a contractor that they've been using for, I don't know, 20 odd years.
So So
How long?
speaking of contracts, then how long is this
Yeah.
new contract for?
Ever since I've been here, they've been using them. There's an outfit in Salisbury that does basically the same thing, except they can't. The counting of the ballots would be the difference that I used
So
over.
how long is this new
But
uh,
it's
contract
definitely,
for-
you're
for the-
agreeing
this business in
That the
Washington?
violation
because
is against the
My
bylaws.
thought process is if
If
we're
somebody
changing
took it to court,
wording,
that's gonna be an issue.
do we want to change it in case there's another board in next year or 2 years from now, whenever this new contract ends? And they want to go back to being local and do it in person, on site and all that stuff. Do we have to redo the language again? You know what I mean? Like, let's,
Well, I guess
It says either by the committee or delegated to a contractor.
but the problem with that is the bylaws, which supersedes this,
Right,
says that the elections committee is responsible for it.
yes.
That's why I think adding at the end of that sentence, but maybe delegated to a contractor and under the supervision of the committee.
Right.
Adding something like that to make clear that they have the ultimate responsibility.
Because potentially the committee may come back and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not gonna be responsible for this if you're gonna ship all this stuff to Washington State.
Right.
How am I supposed to supervise this?
After last year's issue,
Well, again, keep in mind that part of this is also tied to the second paragraph about witnessing the ballot counting. So, I mean, if you look at the this, I think Augie may be correct. But if you look at the discussion that took place at the May board meeting, this was viewed as simply a technically conforming amendment that had to be done because we have this new contract. I mean, that's my characterization of the discussion. So,
but they never at that meeting mentioned it does change the bylaws, which require a vote of the owners.
well, it doesn't change the bylaws because that never, the issue, discussion of the bylaws never came up. It changes what's required under M06 and attachment A. That's all they were trying to address.
Yeah, but
The bylaws, I think I know what you're saying. The bylaws
No.
discussion never came up,
Right,
but I agree with you.
this committee has an
Yes,
obligation to remind
that's
them.
correct.
Steve, is there a signed contract? Do you,
I
I would hope so, but is there?
well, I'm assuming the contract has been signed. The board approved the contract. It just,
Board approval, I agree. Yeah.
yes.
I try to organize my thoughts. As far as I'm concerned, forget about this revision to M06. It's pointless. Simply quite pointless to graft onto an attachment that is solely for in-house performance of the counting, as well as all the other aspects of the election process. At this point in time, you've got a contract and that's what you've got, and that's what you're gonna live with for this election process. And you need to be preparing for next year to have a documented requirement for the remote count process as has been going to be performed this year. I forget the whole darn thing as far as the.
Because it's too late, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's too late. You already signed the contract. It's sort of pointless.
Now, the other thing is, as far as supervising, I'm gonna go with the standard or common definition, dictionary definition, that it's an oversight or overseeing rather, of an activity. Not a direct hands-on, I'm there, do it myself. Nor would I use this word delegate. Not quite sure what else I would say, but delegate the duck counting to the contractor. That's a completely separate part of the election process that needs to be separately considered and not grafted onto attachment A. I'll say it again. This is a useless process to be putting this proposed amendment into 06. I'll complete that comment by saying this is not section 9. Nor is there a section 5A anywhere. It may be paragraph 5 in attachment A, and whatever the A stands for. I don't know if it's supposed to be section 5 and attachment A is what that reference is supposed to be to mean, but there is no section in M06. And as a matter of fact, the definition, there is a definition of section in M06, which means that the section pertains only to a reference to the bylaws. Now, that's a highly technical edit of this particular provision, but I thought I had to make it anyway. Again, as far as I'm concerned, forget.
Was this drafted by Bruce Wright?
Again, what should be done
I
now,
don't know who, I don't know.
when the election is over. Certainly the current election is the primary sole focus of the election committee, but when this election is over, the committee should be working on how to put in M06 a remote count situation, remote count contractor, like the kind of thing that's being done now. And if that requires another attachment to the like the electronic, don't go that way. Whatever we want to go, but that should be the focus. The two focus one is doing what the contract says this time. Focus two is after the election. We're going to consider this kind of a process again. I'm sure we will start putting together and have in place before going out for proposals what the association wants in this kind of context.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jim. I think it's disingenuous to violate the bylaws and then try to change the bylaws after the fact to make it look as though you didn't violate the
Well,
bylaws.
you're not changing the bylaws though. They're only changing.
I mean,
the
I'm sorry.
And then
I'm
house
sorry.
procedure.
The resolution.
You gotta change the bylaws too to allow this.
Yeah,
I take a very broad understanding of what it means by supervise. You know, I was in a situation where I supervised by a distance of 1,500 miles. But what was done was my performance was viewed and monitored and whatever else you're going to say is in this dictionary definition of the word supervise. I take it very broad.
I agree. I agree with that. I don't think somebody necessarily has to physically be there on site.
No.
But I think under the umbrella of supervision, however it is that's going to occur out there, the elections committee should know that, should have an opportunity to review that, make sure that they don't have any issues with how they're going to do it. To me, that would be the supervisory part, but I agree. I don't see the point in us jumping through hoops to get this resolution done and not the contract signed.
Yeah, but it,
Go ahead, Augie.
To me, the thing that's causing a lot of the heartburn is the term in this red line that says the committee, quote, may delegate this responsibility. That really sounds like they're like not in charge. And I don't know why that needs to be there. Like they're really just hiring a contractor to count the ballots, and the contractor happens to be somewhere else. It looks like section 5 of the attachment clearly allows a contractor to be hired, and now they're just dealing with the fact that the contractor is located elsewhere, which is not too surprising. But to me, like if they make clear it's under their supervision, and I don't like that language, delegate this responsibility. That makes it sound like they're washing their hands of it.
right.
And it
I agree
seems
with that.
totally fine and consistent with the bylaws.
I agree.
Yeah, I think if you go back to Jim too, and go back to the bylaws itself, and while that's saying supervise, if they have a procedure to supervise it remotely, then it's fine.
Right.
And it's easy enough. I mean, I worked on the West Coast. I dealt with the Postal Service, highly regulated. And we helped write procedures that affected the use of postage meters. And we remotely supervised where those meters were by exchanging files
Right,
electronically.
right.
They said, this is what we show, this is what you
Right.
show, validate, and we fix the file. So there's a way around it.
Yeah, I agree with Augie. I think
Yeah.
the big deal is those words, delegate responsibility.
Yeah, the red
It's not
line.
responsibility. It's
It's
still
not.
the election committee's responsibility.
Right, but they're-
It's just they're choosing to execute that responsibility through a contract.
yeah, we could, and you could effectively, without messing with the bylaws, rewrite the procedures later to do it. They don't match, they're in a house. But that's an internal procedure. It didn't change the bylaws.
Right.
No owner got the right to complain that you violated the bylaws if you change your internal procedures to control it.
All right, so let me ask a question here. Augie, on that top paragraph, reads section 9 is the responsibility of the committee to count the ballots either by the committee itself or, and then strike, the committee may delegate this responsibility to, and just after the word or, have an independent contractor hired pursuant to paragraph 5. I don't know, Jim is right, I don't know what the A is. Pursuant to paragraph 5. Period. The ballot counting operation may be observed remotely by any association member. Is that, I mean, based upon the fact that Jim says, we've got a contract, follow the contract. If you take that language out, and then we don't have to agree, we don't have to deal with the under the supervision that you'd originally suggested.
Correct.
And then the rest of it, we could live with.
I think that's much more manageable.
That seems much better.
So here,
That fits comfortably within paragraph or section 5 that recognizes that a lot of this will be done with contractors. Like people can't, the committee is not going to sit there itself and count all the ballots every time. And it clearly
Right.
isn't going to happen this time.
You take out this responsibility of the committee, just say that the counting may be done by the committee or a contractor under paragraph 5 of the paragraph.
That's section.
Take out that it is the responsibility of the committee and just indicate.
No,
counting
no,
can
no.
be done.
No, I'm taking out the clause after the word or on the second line.
I think you need to
The
take out,
committee may delegate this responsibility to. If you take that out,
all you need to do is recognize that the counting may be done by the committee
or
a
the contractor.
Correct. So
That's what
take
that
take out this
says.
responsibility of the committee.
right,
Or counting can be done by or shall.
Oh, I see what he's saying. He's saying just
Get the
kill this part right here.
responsibility out of it.
Just strike this right here, so, get rid of it is, the counting of the ballots can be performed either by the committee itself or by an independent contractor hired to pursue and find it.
So we're gonna say,
Right?
Just makes everybody feel good. But when are you gonna,
I got
when's the second reading gonna occur? Is it gonna
On
occur before the
Saturday.
election?
Saturday,
Yeah.
Saturday.
It's not
Here-
this one.
Here's the other question though.
No, wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Second reading is not Saturday. This is the first reading.
no, we did the,
No, you didn't.
No, they called,
well, we did
the
the
board decided that was the first reading.
No.
No.
When was the first reading? Of this
We did a first reading of
recount.
procedures for the recount of
Yes.
N06.
Not for
To the
the,
best of my knowledge, there has not been a first reading of
Exactly.
this one. Correct.
Okay.
Are you sure you're gonna get it done before the election?
Well, Jim,
I'm-
as you
I'm
know,
joking
what's
with you.
the solution? The solution is you have the first reading on next Saturday, and then you call a board meeting for the second reading.
Or you call board meeting for 5 minutes after the first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
But again, this is a waste of time,
Yeah, well,
period.
that's,
Okay, so we're gonna, just so I'm clear, it's the committee's view that that first paragraph should read, Section 9,
No section. Excuse me. It's paragraph 9. You just
oh,
leave-
I'm sorry,
you
paragraph
just-
9.
You just leave it 9.
Just
Oh,
get rid of- just
okay.
delete the word section.
Right, okay, just leave it at number 9. 9, period. Okay, the counting of the ballots either by the committee or an independent contractor hired pursuant to paragraph 5. And the counting of the ballots
Maybe
may be done by,
either the committee itself
right, either the committee itself
or an
or
independent
contractor hired pursuant to paragraph 5.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we're saying.
Now,
Can you do something about the next 2 paragraphs? They
Well-
should be either A and B or some, they're hanging out there by themselves.
You know,
yeah, what do they do?
Well, I mean, a sub paragraph identified.
Yeah, 9A and 9B,
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Right.
Now,
so they're not orphans.
okay,
okay. I will send your suggestions on.
Question.
Bob has a question.
I have a question.
Be immediately
Let's go
stopped.
back to MO6. Okay, let's go to the basic one, not an attachment, and go to item number 6. And that says storage of election materials, records, and voting equipment. And if you start going through that, but the bottom line there is the general manager is responsible for making suitable storage space available. And it's talking about maintaining the records. Are they gonna ship them in here? Or are they gonna,
When
are they
everything
gonna
is
store
done,
them electronically?
when everything is done, ostensibly they'll be shipped back here.
It is gonna be shipped back here.
It's supposed to be.
Oh,
We were, look,
I'm-
you're asking me a question I can't answer.
You're only,
There was,
Right.
there was a discussion about how are we gonna get are we gonna have a collection box or facility in here? And how are we gonna get that back out to Washington? And the answer was, well, we could use UPS.
Yeah,
None of that was passed. It just said we could do that. Now, whether or not it happens, I don't know.
This is why this committee exists. Because when the board tries to redline stuff on the fly, they miss things like this.
Mhm.
They think, oh, that's easy, we'll just change this paragraph and all will be good. And then it comes to us and we're like, well, it's not that easy because all these other paragraphs are okay. And 6 is all about, what's it called? Chain of custody, essentially. That's what 6 is about, right? So it seems to me, if you're going to mail these things across country to somebody else outside the control of the committee, you're gonna have to say something here.
Mhm.
Because they're no longer in our custody.
well,
What happens if UPS loses it, delivers it to
Well,
the wrong address?
think
then?
of it-
You're Trusting,
Your SOL.
I don't know where the vendor is located up there, but I do know that the postal service closed processing centers over in Easton. Every piece of mail now goes to Baltimore and then comes back, unless some postal employee decides to circumvent the system.
The drop box pick up and send to
That's what I heard.
Washington issues are just kind of a symptom of where we're kind of stuck right now. And I don't want to get into any kind of discussion as to why we're stuck with provisions that are uncertain and need to be clarified certainly in the future. It's one thing to say we're gonna close the drop box at a certain time and get them to Seattle, Washington in time for them to be there by the cutoff date. You know, whatever the cutoff time is, I think maybe it's 4 o'clock our time here. How do you get it to UPS, FedEx, or the postal service for that matter, and get it out to Seattle? I don't think you can sit here and say, well, we'll send it overnight. Where are you gonna go? Where do you have to get to here to get an overnight delivery to the West Coast? I don't know, but you need to look at that. You know, I've had experience with having to ship stuff, and there are places where you cannot pick up and get it out overnight,
right?
or nor can you get it to overnight. I say that only because it's the indication of the number of things that are really in play that aren't specifically called out in any kind of our documentation. And we're kidding ourselves, like, thinking we're doing something by something effective by changing this resolution in the manner we're talking about.
Well,
I'm
I'm gonna say something that's not gonna make anybody in this room very happy,
If it feels good, do it.
which is the issue you're raising and all of the ripple effect that you're now identifying is the burden of the election committee to have resolved past tense, because the contract's already been approved. I don't disagree with anything you're saying.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's exactly right. So
So why do anything?
why are we messing with this?
Right,
Well,
because
my responsibility, I felt, was for you to see the red line version.
right,
To see whether or not it's in conflict with any of our governing documents. The other issues that are being raised, I don't disagree with. And they were raised in whole or in part during the discussion with the board, and the board voted the way the board did. I
Right.
mean,
so they own it. So
so the only.
why
issue-
change anything until you do it properly? So use this for an experience, see how well it works, what worked good, what didn't work, and then fix the documentation and give it to the committee so they can
Well,
look at it.
Okay, my question then comes to this committee. Do you want me to proffer to the board your suggested changes to the red line? If you don't want me to, I won't.
I think what our feedback should be is that we see potential conflicts and problems with the language that need to be adjudicated.
Yeah.
And that it's gonna take a little bit of time, and that there's questions that have arose from process and procedure that we don't think is being addressed, that may need to be addressed. So it's more than just this. I mean, I think our feedback should just generally be, we have concerns with the language and the implementation and the ripple effects thereof.
Well, that's fine, but I'll go back to Jim's original point, which is there's a contract.
Well, right, so our feedback to the board is just like, do whatever you want to do.
You've already made the
think-
decision.
We think there's a problem with this that needs to be figured out, and we'll help figure that out. We just don't know all the answers right now. We need a little bit of time to figure this out. This is, and rushing through and signing this is kind of pointless because you already have a contract.
Yeah, because the committee, the elections committee should have changed their procedure to be consistent with what they want to do.
Right.
And that hasn't been done.
Okay, I don't want to
Go
cast
ahead.
any real problem on the elections committee. We've got time to think ahead and get stuff like this in place. It's not an easy task. And
No.
I think, as a matter of fact, last year, we have, well, whoever has the 2022 version of M06, the approval date on that, I think, is well after the election process was in ongoing. And that was even though the, say, difficulties, even though it was recognized well in advance. When I say well in advance, I'm talking a year or more in advance, that if we went to electronic voting, there had to be some changes made.
Right.
Changes in quotation, changes
Right.
what bylaws, resolution, all of the above. That was recognized well in advance, and attempts were made at doing that, even under that circumstances. It wound up not being accomplished until well after the process was started. And the end result was actually something drafted by the M06 amendment, was actually drafted by the then council. So I don't want to cast any aspersions on the election committee or anybody else for that matter. In a changing circumstance situation, having difficulty, the difficult part of being ahead of the task and documentation. The other thing is my personal response to what Steve has said about what to do. My personal feeling is it's pointless to do this amendment to the M06. But if you want to, you, the board, feel it's imperative or necessary to do that, the change that you have is the way to go from the committee standpoint.
I will That's
I'm
what I
I'm
was,
not a committee member,
I understand,
okay?
But you're here, Jim, because
but-
we asked you to be here because we really value your input.
Well, it's a
Committee
fair,
Consultant.
it's a fair point in that at a minimum, we've identified improvements to this language at a minimum.
Right.
And so, yeah, I agree with that. If the board is absolutely determined to move ahead with something, well, then you can move ahead with that.
Yeah, they-
Just be advised that our position is that we think there's
Still
more to
more
this.
to it,
There's more work that needs to be done on this.
right? So I did.
But
find-
they already have a contract, so it's a
The
done deal.
version of M06 on the website is this one from June 27th, 2022. So if there's something you want me to pull up there, tell me.
No, I think if you go back and you look at what you pointed out in the bylaws, if the procedures clearly define the process that shows control, then there's nothing wrong with the way the bylaws are
Right.
written. But the procedures have to be changed and they're all internal procedures, so. And I'm not casting on the elections committee. I'm just saying, no, but the election committee recommended to the board to go that way. So they have to help in how they're gonna control that process. And they probably,
well,
I
yeah,
don't know how much pressure they're under.
well, okay, I'm not, I sort of agree with Jim, it doesn't pay to cast aspersions
No,
on the
I'm not.
elections committee by anyone, including me,
Right.
and I'm not suggesting anyone else is.
No,
I mean, what we have here, in all candor, is a situation where this has come up because the contract that was brought to the board came up in May. We're not changing the election season, so we have truncated virtually everything that we need to be worried about. So we have a contract, we do the election following the contract, but I think it is worthwhile, if this is what the committee wants me to do, to say to the board that there are a number of issues that the elections committee has to take the time to work through relating to the processes and procedures that we have in M06 and the various attachments. That if we can't, it is difficult, why don't we say,
Mhm.
to both adhere to a contract and adhere to our processes and procedures when the contract comes up and nothing else is addressed, and that's what happened at the May board.
Yeah.
And I'm certain I will get. Nothing.
okay,
Yeah.
right.
They are.
Well, I
already see
read
it.
part of the comments from some of the people, the board members that were interviewed by the media on it, and basically the comments were, well, the resolutions are the board's resolution, so it's an easy fix. I agree with that, as long as they're researched, they're informed, and, and all the boxes are checked, and I just don't think that's happened. I don't think there's been thoroughly researched. I don't think the board's fully informed of all the things that it'll be affected. I mean, we're just figuring some of the stuff out sitting here in the room, so. I'm sure that's the argument, is it's our resolution, we should be able to just change it.
That's what was posted on Reynolds' website. You read it.
What is it?
To me, it's questionable.
Oh, Joe, right?
Yeah, he just posted verbatim, but that clearly defines it. If you read the background, that's the real key to it. Here. I read it. I don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, I see what he's saying here. I guess I would like to know, and maybe Jim knows this. When the resolution was changed at some point in the past to say, this has got to be on site, it's got to be accessible physically to the membership to come in and view it with their eyeballs.
Right.
What was the context in which that was? Did something happen that made people concerned? And so that was a deliberate change to the resolution
Deliberate change.
to dissuade that concern. In other words, are we undoing that now? that lesson learned from the past?
I think if you can if you can see it, if you trust what you see, it doesn't change anything. You could get into a large room, you can put a display, you can show the counting mechanism. You can show how they're processing the ballots. But they weren't gonna divulge the final count, were they? Or did they at that time?
I'm gonna go in part by memory. Going back probably at least 10 years now, there were comments, discussions, whatever, about the counting of the ballots in closed session. The original resolution that preceded M06 and the first M06 after that was released explicitly stated that the count of the ballots would be in closed session. And that had a continuing disfavor among parts of the community, if I can put it that way.
Mhm.
And if I recall correctly, one board, again, we're going back about the 2010 thereabouts, 2011, 2012, when that kind of reached a crescendo, one board resigned in mass, claiming that they weren't being trusted. And a new board came, new board members, not board members, committee members were eventually appointed in a timely manner, similar to what happened this past fall. And so there was a continuation of disagreement, should we say, with that closed meeting provision. Now, some of you may have seen a recent posting in the local Ocean Pines forum by a former board member and at the time elections committee member and chair, that's Steve Toe, commenting on how we got to this point in the resolution where it being a counting that could be witnessed. But that was an outgrowth in particular by his efforts to get the resolution changed so that it was not a closed session. And I fully agreed with that, except that my personal view is not only the transparency, but you can't do a count in a closed meeting by a committee of the association. There's just no closed meeting provision that would permit that. But be that as it may, that's how the resolution got changed to pick up its current open meeting counting of the ballots. It did satisfaction with it being performed without there's some opportunity for observation of what was being done. And again, I think I'm pretty sure I'm saying this correctly. One committee, and I think a pretty competent committee, my observation, felt that they were being considered not trustworthy and resigned over the issue. And in time after that, the resolution did become changed. That's how it sits today.
So this sounds very synonymous then with the whole electronic voting debate, where we weren't sure how it was going to go, what the results were going to be. We're going to do this, we're going to see how it works out. That's what this sounds like. We're going to have this remote viewing. We're going to have a link people can click on and watch it. We're not really sure how it's going to work out.
One final comment on that. It's my perception, my understanding that what we've been talking about is primarily the witnessing of the vote and not who does the counting of the vote, the witnessing of the count, and not the counting that who's doing the counting is actually secondary. Because it says that in the lead, it says the counting is done by the committee. Okay, we got to change that because we're going to talk about witnessing it somewhere else. I thought that the real impetus behind having to change this provision was because it was not being done locally.
Yes, and I look, for what it's worth, that was one of the major points I raised during the discussion. If you read N06 as it's currently written in the various attachments, I don't think there's any question that language, without saying so specifically, but just assumes that this would be a function done locally.
Correct.
And by kicking it across the country to the state of Washington, you have to change what's there. I mean, and my recollection from the May board meeting was that Doug quickly said, well, I had a conversation yesterday with council, and there's some minor tweaks that we can do to accomplish this goal. And at that point, I said, so in other words, we're amending the resolution to accommodate the contract that hadn't yet been voted on. And he basically said I was out of order, and that's how that's really where the discussion ended.
Right.
But I mean,
I saw that.
that's what happened. I mean, so
So
we'll leave it at that.
I don't want to prolong this any longer. Personally, I think we gotta move on here. Because we're not gonna get to the next item.
Well, we need to give
Personal
some
comment.
feedback to Steve is what we want Steve to do, right?
Well, what, I mean, basically what I'm going to say in an email to, I'm gonna send this to the board and the elections committee chair. I think I have his email. That it is the opinion of the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee that that after the election, the Elections Committee should undertake a review of the procedures found in M06 and the various attachments, and ensure that this contract or any future contract adheres to those procedures, or in the alternative, recommend procedural changes prior to the approval of a contract.
Yes,
Correct.
correct.
Okay, but what about the proposed amendment itself?
Well, I'm gonna say that, basically, the Bylaws Committee is recommending the following changes to the amendment. And that this would be a first reading. And that,
We're recommending changes to this particular language,
yes,
because if we had time, our version of the amendment might include that and might include a bunch of other stuff too. So I don't think the committee is calling this an amendment. I think the
No.
committee is saying this language you're proposing, if you're gonna use this, we recommend these changes to that language.
Yeah.
And then ideally, we will continue our conversation with this. Obviously, we're smack dab in the middle of an election cycle right now, but as soon as it's done, we really need to sit down and look at.
Well, that's what Steve was saying.
Right.
After the election committee will
But
do that.
we need him to be able to convey to the other directors that this is not, our committee does not feel that this is the end of the discussion.
We don't think this is the comprehensive solution to
Correct.
this
No.
issue. This particular language, these are the tweaks we
That
recommend.
before the next election cycle, we should have all of those tweaks and everything.
Before the
Figure it
next
out
election
before we
cycle,
even
and
start
before
the
another
next election
contract
cycle.
is signed.
Was this contract only for this cycle?
It's only for this cycle, isn't
Is it a 1 year?
I believe that's correct. Let's see what it says.
I don't see anything in it to grant an extension of
Okay.
options,
Yeah, extended for multi-years,
option for the next year.
because that would obligate future boards.
I believe this is just for 2023.
Yeah, it would.
Although
obligate-
I mean, what I've got is what was given to us. Yeah, well, the motion
President.
the motion
communication with
reads,
council. We trust.
to
that the
approve
president's
cost of
communication with council.
$15,994.50 for sourcing a voting contractor, election trust, to perform the printing and handling of all election materials for the 2023 board directors election.
2023, okay.
That's
That's
what-
what it sounds like for this
Okay.
election cycle.
So what you were saying there,
Yeah, I just took a little,
no,
umbrage of the use of the word amendment.
Mhm.
It's to us, this isn't a comprehensive amendment.
But look, as I say, I mean, I think the initial responsibility for addressing all of the issues relating to the procedures doesn't rest with this committee,
Right.
it rests with the elections committee.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
and that's what I'm gonna say to the board, and then I will also say that, you know, this is our recommended change to your suggested amendment to meet the concerns about the remote function of that the contractor will be performing, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Well, and if the question arises, well, why do they want these, why are we recommending these changes made? I mean, the answer to that is we think it could potentially be viewed as a conflict with the bylaws supervision requirement. So not directly, but maybe indirectly or inferred with that particular language. So just remove it, just remove that language.
And I think frankly, in part based upon what Augie you still there? Yeah, he's, okay. In part what I think by
Sorry.
by making these changes, the language is a little bit tighter and a little bit neater. I
Yes.
mean,
Right.
and also the last two paragraphs have to be designated As and Bs.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
but I do think that there is one, we should make it clear that this would be a first reading,
Mhm.
so.
All right, so is there anything?
Do we need to vote on that?
That's what I was gonna say. Do we, so we can reinstate the Roberts rules to allow the, committee to actually, approve, do you want me to figure out, the wording on the motion, or do either of you want to?
Well, so if we're reinstated, I would say, I would make a motion that the afore discussed language as suggested by Steve in this email be our input on this issue, specifically this language back to the board.
Second now.
Second that, okay, any further discussion? All right, so all in favor of the motion that we just made, to take back that, and look at the, updated wording, that we're recommending, to the suggested amendments that you brought to us, back to the directors, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, then our board
So
gives
are you gonna-
Steve the permission to go ahead and take back all that on our behalf.
Right.
you're gonna make that just an email to the,
I'll make it as an email because
right,
I sort of want to be able to say to them, you know, this should be done at the time of the first reading.
right.
Because again, they do the first reading during the board meeting and have called second meeting right away. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, and just,
Are you gonna copy Laura on that?
yeah, I'll, yeah.
Steve, there's no reason why a first reading cannot be amended. In other words, what
Correct.
is there is a first reading and then amend that first reading. You
I
can
get-
do anything at the first reading.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it would be easier if they did the first reading with this as amended. I don't, whether or not they will or not, I don't know. At that point, I mean, I could foresee, look,
Yeah.
I am not sure that my colleagues on the board would necessarily agree that this is a first reading. Let me leave it at that.
Okay.
Which is why it would be good that they got the recommended suggestions from us prior to it being read. Is what we're saying.
If it's not a first reading, we could have received a marked up document if it was a first reading.
Well, no,
No?
okay, it's more basic than that. All you gotta do is read B01 and know it's not a first reading.
Yeah.
Now, I'll stop there.
We don't want to put you in the spot.
I'll stop there.
And,
You wanna join me at the bar afterwards?
Yeah.
all right. Okay, So is there any further discussions that need to happen for any of this for Steve prior to the director's meeting? Is there anything else that we
I
need
think
to
we
do?
resolved it with your motion.
Don't you think- Oh, no, this one, no, but you have to get to the recount,
The what,
the
say?
recount.
The recount.
Oh,
That,
yeah,
that was the first reading.
yeah, right. Now that's the other. What I did there.
Where the heck is the recount?
All this little bit of silence, so a decision needs to be made about referring anything to the council.
As to the recount provisions,
Either one of them. Or either one of them. Either the recount or the,
well, the red line came from council, whether or not,
okay. I'm just,
Which one?
they consider.
I don't know. I'm looking now.
I'm
To
trying
whether
to
we,
figure out which.
I understand.
No, okay,
Now
I
the-
grabbed the wrong one. I'm looking.
Which
for-
one is that? What am I pulling up?
the
Recount.
M06, the first reading for the May board meeting.
Okay, so hold on.
The one that's got the bylaws provision at the top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first reading for that, but now the other is the first reading for the changes. Anyway, let's be that as it may.
I'm trying to figure out what am I pulling up here? Tell me
There's
exactly.
Is
Is it-
from the board's packet from the May meeting. There was a first reading for
Yeah,
approval
Some of the
of
things that you sent me.
amend
Is that one of the
M06
things you
dealing with
sent me?
recount procedures.
It was in your, it's one of those items on your, list of materials in the original, agenda meeting.
Okay, I gotta figure out what I labeled it. Hold on.
BM 06 something.
We got a couple of M06s.
Yeah, you have several. Those are pages out of M06 that are irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Okay.
It's a completely new paragraph,
All right.
or would
We're
be.
gonna go back. I'm looking up.
Read anything you got there.
Is it in one of the attachments or is
It
it?
should be one of the attachments to.
I love how this one, my virus thingy always says that our OPA website
Is that
is
say,
untrustworthy.
You're probably not. I don't trust you.
Because Kaspersky does not like it. All right, so let me go
Go to departments, go to board of directors.
under the May
Scroll
one you
down.
said. Meeting materials, you
Yeah,
want the May 27th
not the special,
or
no,
the, oh,
regular board
right, the
meeting.
May 20th.
And then you're gonna, he gets down to
Somewhere about.
the amendment to N06. Hold on.
Here,
There you go. That's the one.
is that what I'm getting here? Okay.
That's the motion and then there should be an attachment. Yeah, there you go.
Here, okay.
Right there. That's it.
Got it.
Okay. Now, the only thing I would say about this, and I just started to come through it yesterday, frankly, was the motion is written as an amendment to M06. The way this is laid out strikes me that they're actually trying, it almost looks like they're amending the bylaws. But I believe that the proposed recount procedures that you see there are meant to go to N06. I think it's just laid out awkwardly. It's the way I phrase it. But That's my only observation.
Before we get into any really substantive discussion, I hadn't really given a whole lot of thought to that, what you just said as to where it goes. But again, the attachment A is for an election managed in-house, by the committee, if I can put it that way. Attachment B just deals with referendum. Attachment C is relative to candidate participation in an election. D is the electronic voting, so there's no real place in any of the existing attachments, nor any future one, if one on remote counting, remote processing, whatever.
Why
This
wouldn't it be part of attachment A? Why wouldn't it get
would
added either
fit.
to the end?
It
or
would fit in
somewhere?
the basic text of the resolution. That's the resolution, well, that's the part of the resolution that is above the signature. Would not be it, or unless you think it as a separate attachment itself.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, what you're suggesting is,
It doesn't belong in an existing attachment.
right. Excuse me, so it's either an attachment E or the language here
Well, we talked about,
it would the letter E, board of directors. We see, this is sort of where I'm a little confused. Because if you look at what's laid out here. At the very top. It says N06 elections referendum voting procedures at A11.C. C, a candidate may request a recount at the annual meeting. The board is responsible for resolving any request for a recount. Parent, section 5.03 E of the bylaws, period. And then there's Roman numeral 5, the board of directors. So I'm not clear what they're.
probably in the motion, it's to amend resolution M06.
Right, that's what it says.
And now, so I've never interpreted what says proposed recount procedures. I've never interpreted or understood that to mean a revision to the bylaws.
Well, except for just above that, it says section 5.0.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
So that's what I just don't know what I know what the first reading motion says.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why this is written the way it is. So it may just be stylistic. I can see the.
Well, that's where Bob's red line requirement, not Bob's requirement, but that's where the red line of an existing resolution comes into play. And then you know where you want to put it, what it is and where it's going.
Right.
Proposed to go.
Right.
But my interpretation is an M06 amendment.
Into the body of N06.
Well, somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
Where is the secondary, very secondary point at this point, yeah.
Well,
The
why wouldn't it
provisions,
just go at the
close.
end of attachment A? As part of like a section 13 of attachment A or section 14, whatever section would be next. Since attachment A is the voting procedures.
That's true, but that attachment has always been specifically geared for an in-house count in particular. But let me make a suggestion. I think I divert us from the real purpose, and that the real purpose is to look at the provision itself. Where this would go is an issue, or not an issue, but something that has to be decided. Yes, I second it. So I again diverting.
Yeah, I'm just making the observation because committee decides what it wants to do vis-a-vis the language that is there. And that's.
Guys, I don't wanna just jump in here, but I do have some comments, but I wanna, I'm not a committee member and I don't wanna be taking time from committee members.
And just to be clear, we kind of unofficially rescinded the Roberts rules again after that last vote.
They're
Make sure
suspended.
that
I'm
all
not
these-
gonna try to.
I don't want anybody to right. I
They're
don't want
they're
anybody to-
suspended for everything but
So this
voting.
is the one, this is the version of M06 that's posted on the website currently.
I can't
But I
find
pulled
any
back.
place here where it would be appropriate to have it.
Well, if you go to the attachment A, and you go down to C, what is it, 11C? 11C,
Under
11C.
number 2.
11C,
or-
that's where this, the other thing that you had up there started.
Mhm, this part, yeah.
Right there, yeah. So A11C, so that paragraph C there, candidate may request, that's what's currently in there. Right, and then it almost looks like that in the middle there, that B, the board of directors, 503,
Mhm.
they just stuck that there as an explanation of what that section of the bylaw says. So I'm assuming that proposed recount procedures, whoever wrote this is saying that would become part of C. Because C is about a recount. Candidate may request a recount at the annual meeting. So then theoretically, this would be appended to that paragraph.
That's a bylaws revision amendment.
No, I'm talking about from here down. This is not part of the bylaws, right?
No, that's
Proposed.
not, no, none of that is.
Yeah, I'm saying, I think whoever wrote this just stuck this in there to explain what that was.
Okay, I agree. With this, they're trying to tell you why they are writing a recount procedure. There is none. Never has been one. Just the only thing we've ever had is a bylaws provision that says the board shall resolve a recount request. So this is, and this has been kind of a long-standing background, not issue, a background topic. What are we gonna do if we ever get somebody ask for a recount? And this is the solution to that kind of simmering background question that's been around for several years. And I think the last election where we did have a fairly close count on the recount,
Yeah,
regarding any issues of the overall accuracy of the voting itself, which could never be resolved. There was in the end, on the mail-in ballots, a relatively close, or maybe mail-in plus electronic, I should say. There was a relatively close
Mhm.
between the last winner and the next person up. So that's a right question for right now.
Yeah.
So
I
then,
understand why this is before the board
Right.
and now.
so doesn't that mean if at the annual meeting, which is held in August, right? Any candidate who wants to demand recount would do it then, right? Does that mean since we're using an out-of-state contractor now for all of that, that they will ship all of those materials prior so that we have them available at the annual meeting? How do you resolve a recount request at the annual meeting if we don't have the material?
Well,
Mike?
okay,
I mean, maybe that's just
go ahead, Jim.
too much for me, but
we're stepping a little bit ahead here. I would prefer that we
Yeah.
start at the top. and
Okay.
Yeah,
make our way
So,
down.
tell-
did anybody have that printed out?
No,
I-
I don't, I thought I had it, but I don't have it either. They
So-
This is
proposed,
that
How much,
packet.
how much, so there's a
just a
lot,
minute,
proposed recount procedures.
Right. Do you want
maybe
to
I,
put it down?
no, I have the older version here, but
So all of this is new. Okay, here we go. So all of this is new. Election will be final. So,
see about,
so first order of business, where did this go?
well,
It would have to go in M06
My-
or a separate resolution, which I wouldn't.
my question would be, shouldn't that have been given to the election committee because it's, and then they in turn give us a red line of where they want to put it?
What's,
Is that what this is?
it says it came from the election, or the election committee, does it say that somewhere here?
submitted by Rick Farr.
Revisions are proposed by the elections committee, after reviewing M06. So I can take that right what it says. Came from the elections committee.
And we're being asked to review it.
Now,
But it doesn't specify where this goes.
no, but again, that would be the benefit of a markup of M06.
Yeah, I mean, without them,
But that's,
I guess, when we wrote the procedures, how they should address this committee, the one exception would be the board. Because any other committee that wants to change it should send it to the board, and then the red line, the board approves it and sends it to the committee.
So that, I'm slowly getting up to speed with what Jim's saying. This charging document says purpose and effect would amend recount procedures under section 503. Well, that's the bylaws.
Right,
So the charging document's wrong.
right. The charging document says change of bylaws.
Right, so,
I don't think it's in the bylaws.
well, the bylaw, the section 503, the bylaws just, is literally just says the board's responsible for resolving this.
Right,
So, after reviewing M6, may request a recount, time votes for discussion, election, board outlined in 50. Yeah, so they keep referring to 503 like it's well, even Steve said this, like they're trying to amend the charging document needs to be changed.
and that's not very well, I agree.
No.
But I think
Votes shall be resolved by chance.
the committee now.
What does that
the
mean?
Provisions themselves.
Votes shall be
Not
resolved
worried
by
about what they're
chance at
trying
the
to
annual
amend.
meeting if there's a tie. What does chance mean?
chance means it's a card game. You draw the cards and whoever wins, wins. That's the way it's resolved. So there's a resolution. But if somebody demands a recount and doesn't want that, there gotta be a procedure for the recount.
M06 specifically says how you do the resolve the tie. I think you take a
Yeah, card, drawing of the card, chance.
cards, ace is high, deuce is low, ace high or high card wins.
Right. That's exactly there.
It says in
But-
to that effect.
If the election, if you are running for the board and it's an absolute tie, you get the right to demand a recount rather than take the chance.
It should be interpreted that way, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily say that.
I know, but it's the old story. You don't have a problem until somebody spends the money and hires an attorney. I know. Yeah, how do you avoid that?
Well, if we don't care about how the charge document's written,
Right.
What can we do to help?
well, I guess we can review this language here, this recount procedure language, and then make a suggestion as to where to put it.
Yeah,
So to look at the blue, not red, the blue change, which is hard to see on the screen.
Well, but it's, I mean, where does this otherwise exist?
We have to look at the
This-
whole thing, right?
Yeah, the whole thing's new, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all of, even, so this is all new
Right.
with new stuff in the new.
Right.
you can stop while it's so.
There you go.
Should go, you can lock me out. I'll, if I may, we'll start making some comments.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I'm up to speed now with,
Okay, and I'm gonna acknowledge from the very beginning of my comments, that some of my comments are gonna go to governing documents issues. Some of them are gonna probably go to individual personal writing style, and other are gonna go to clarification that I think is appropriate. But it starts out, before you get to the numbering, you have, if a recount request is made to the board of directors in office on the day of the annual meeting, the board will take the following action. And then you get down in one, it says this board, a request for recount must be received in writing from the board candidate prior to the annual meeting of the association. In no particular order, that made to the board of directors in office on the day of the annual meeting. The day of the annual meeting or prior to the annual meeting language, I would prefer to see, say, the request has to get to the president prior to the opening of the meeting itself, prior to convening the meeting. The president stands up and says, the meeting will now come to order. Well, you're now too late to make a request for a recount. In that same area, a request for recount must be received in writing prior to the annual meeting. I don't know that writing includes paper, not handwritten, but paper writing or can you include in that the presumption at least that is acceptable for an electronic writing? I don't know. But I would rewrite that to mean that it must be received in written or electronic form and signed. It does not say anything about signing it, but it should be and signed. Then again, we get into this prior to the annual meeting. Beyond that, it goes on to say must be provided to the board president. It's not a board president, it's the association president. And to the election committee chairperson. I know I'm getting into clarity and personal style, but I don't believe it should be directed to the president and the election committee chair. The election committee chair can get an information copy, and I would also give an information copy to the secretary. That's even a step further. But it should be directed to the president because it's the action of the president. It's not the action of the president and the election committee. What election committee actually will come later.
Yeah, I agree with that. The annual meeting is where the results of the election are formally announced.
And we're gonna get to that. I've got comments on that too, but yeah,
Are they announced informally prior to that?
yes. Whatever M06 says, when it's to be announced, go to where is it in there? It's in
Election reporter?
no,
Well, I believe you if you say.
Yeah, there.
It's in, so
In
the
the red
results are
line, they're saying
informally
you're not gonna
announced
announce
prior. So they're formally announced.
you can look up the election committee has posted information as to the date count and the count, I'm sorry, the receipt of ballot cutoff date, then the date count, and then it should include the release of the information. You're gonna know what it is at the count is completed.
That one says no. This says no. You're not supposed to, you're not gonna be told. The second paragraph, right there.
It's
The written ballot process will not be privy to vote totals during
during, yeah,
the process.
that's the key part.
Yeah, during.
So they mean during, so at the end you get it, but you don't see it while it's happening.
Okay, let's resolve this. Let's resolve.
Prior to the,
Can Laura can call M06. Then Carol, I don't care whether we got the.
prior to the commencement of the annual meeting, prior to the,
It's the information is released immediately after the count. And it should be in M06.
There should be.
Yeah.
I
Regardless
can
of
remember
whether
that.
M06 is completely correct right now or not. It's in there.
prior to the start of the annual meeting?
Yeah.
Prior to the start of the annual meeting,
Yeah, because
prior to the start.
it wasn't that one of the issues where they didn't want to release it because they thought it was a drawing card to get a minority.
That was one of them.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons, yeah.
You could get a quorum because everybody
For the
wanted to know
annual
what it
meeting.
was. One.
What?
I'm gonna have to get it, see if I can talk about, hold on.
I just,
All right, so I've got the M06 up there, the presentation of voting results. That's written in the current version of M06 posted.
And that's the presentation. Let's back up a little bit.
Go up.
How far?
I'm not sure we're going anywhere. Okay.
Counting ballots, maybe, or
Let's go back to the end of this attachment.
which way? So we can't.
Yeah, but I think we're going to have to go to attachment. Keep on scroll down.
This is the. I think I'm under the,
Slow down.
I'm under attachment A.
Yeah, well, okay, we need to get to the end, more toward the end of the attachment.
Which one say it again? You're talking that way and I can't hear you.
We need to go to the end of,
End of-
scroll toward the end.
Okay, and
I'm not sure that it's actually the end of this attachment now. This is all about materials. The loading process, keep going. Keep going, keep going. We gotta get down to at least 9, because that's the counting. It's not in here, I don't believe. No, keep going.
Presentation of
Here's
voting
the-
results.
Here it is. I think what you need
Nine
is
E.
90, yeah. 2 original copies of the final vote count should be prepared and certified. Signed and dated by the chair. The final vote count will be attested to by the election committee members present. Upon attestation of the final vote count, the results will be announced, emailed to the board of directors, emailed to all candidates, and posted on the Ocean Pines Association website.
Okay, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for more detailed information. Or I'm gonna take a chance, go to attachment C.
C, is that what you said? Okay.
I wish I had my own page copy, but I don't.
That's okay.
I love the tie vote.
huh,
I love the tie vote when there's a tie vote.
yeah,
High card wins.
yeah. Las Vegas style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how the recount procedure works for
All
that.
right, that was C. So I just went through. Am I still going?
That's,
Because this is all the electronic stuff. And attachment D,
the electronic stuff. I wish I had my super copy. That's not gonna have anything. This is all candidate information. You can bring a copy of the paper card. All right, stuff. Where in the world is it?
And we're back up into B.
That's B is only referendum. All right, Laura, go back all the way to the beginning of the resolution.
the very beginning, the top. Okay.
I should know better than this. Okay, stop. Now let's scroll down through.
Back down.
Okay, word definition, I keep going. Okay, keep going. This is just, gotta get past this part. This just shows what the attachments are. Oh, I don't know what happened. We specified when there is a cutoff of the ballot receipt. Specified when the date is to be, when it's supposed to be the date of the count. I'm gonna have to figure out where it is. Don't have stuff with me to do that.
So it must have probably got dropped when you were revising.
No,
Talking about voting deadline?
no, what we're talking about is the vote tally being known before the annual meeting.
Right.
Yeah, because I think at the last election, Joe Reynolds actually had it published in his,
Oh, yeah. That's documented. on-
yeah, I know it is. I'm trying to remember where now, because that was a change. I think even that was not so long ago that it got changed. Colette, I think, was still,
Nobody has a paper copy of M06.
I have a paper copy, but this is the older version.
That's all.
You're welcome to it.
This is the 5.2520 version.
This
Yeah,
is the
the one that,
one that I have.
the one that she sent out.
Well, that's the 2021. The one I have up on the screen right now is what's posted on the website,
Okay.
which is labeled 2022.
If I accidentally ever did work correct.
Well, 7 in the 2020 says that the elections committee is going to send a report within 30 days of the vote count to the board. So within 30 days of the election, the results are going to be made known.
Don't honestly know what it
It is interesting, this copy that I have that's on the website. You can tell there's some formatting issues. Because look at letter E right now. It says 2 original copies of the final vote count shall be prepared. And then we know in our minds we're reading certified. but that is-
Self-certified.
Yeah.
That's actually, that's a number 1.
It's
That's
like,
not
yeah.
even an L, that's a number
Because
1.
there's there was something else that we were just looking at that did that too, where it popped a number in it instead of the letter.
Will be announced live on the OPA internet stream and or
Which do
TV,
we have?
emailed to the directors, emailed to all the candidates. That's members present. We're just gonna copy the bottom post. Scroll up a little bit.
Up.
Yeah,
Like-
up. Prior to, right there, very close. Doesn't say when. It says how.
I don't know what the timing is, but my thought is it would be good to do the recount before the annual meeting.
Yeah.
But I think the potential problem with that is that, you don't, there's only like a 2-day gap between the tabulating of the votes and the annual meeting.
Oh, is it that close?
I think so.
But see, how's that gonna fly with you've got everything on the West Coast now.
Don't have. I don't know.
Don't ask me that question.
We don't wanna be logical now, do we? That there might be
Well, I
some
mean, that-
glitches in that.
I think she raised a good point. The point 4 here says the contractor operating the scanner has to be there at the recount. Are these people on the West Coast gonna be there? Who's
Right.
gonna be at this recount?
Well, This is just another example of a ripple from
There-
this change that has to be
Right,
addressed.
that nobody thought that.
I
was
have
not
about
thought
6
through.
or 8 of mine marked up like that, things that have to be changed, but the election committee's got to look at it when they have time.
Okay, I'm frankly completely discombobulated as to why we cannot find the counting and release of the count that makes it possible for there to be whatever it is, 2-day, 2.5 day gap in there for a candidate to decide whether or not they want to make a request for recount prior to the start of the annual meeting.
Right.
I gotta figure that out. But
If I can, I think the release of the information that you're talking about is what everybody relies on, I think, is what's in the attachment about certifying and published on the website and all that sort of stuff. The 2 or 2.5 is simply the calendar that has been announced, at least this year, for the election cycle.
Well, the election committee is given the authority to, it's gotta be in here somewhere. And how it's worded, given the authority to set the date when the count is going to be made, or I'm sorry, when the deadline is going to be for the count, or like, when the deadline for the receipt of ballots. The committee has the authority to set that date. Or it may in fact be in here, I don't remember. I think
Attachment A.
it's in here.
Well, attachment A, paragraph 3 says voting deadline. Deadline for returning ballot envelopes for the election of directors and for referendum issues being voted on at the same time as the board election shall be prior to the end of the association's regular business hours on the Wednesday before the annual meeting of the members in August.
Okay, there's something that gives you,
And then A says the annual meeting is held on the second Saturday in August of each year.
okay, there's something that gives the authority to the committee to set the date and time, date of the count. And that is being set sufficient time, and I don't know where we've got that, I'm lost. Sufficient time between the count and the meeting, the candidate who may want to request may be able to look at the data and decide whether or not they want to request a recount. That needs to be better identified as to how we do that. But let's go back to we got off on a legitimate diversion then maybe, but let's get back to the basic point.
Okay,
If it's an annual meeting with a quorum, the annual meeting must proceed to and through the validation of the count. Because if you don't do that, you have no record, no formal record in the association records, minutes of the annual meeting in this case, of what that election result was. And that election result will be the basis upon which somebody's recount request will be looked at. If there is no annual meeting, then it's got to go to the special meeting of validation by the board before you get into the consideration of a recount. Let me kind of walk my way through it. I'll use first I don't have to use the second, the special board meeting. Let's talk about the annual meeting. A candidate delivers to the president electronic or written paper that he's requesting a recount. The president has that in hand as the meeting starts. You get all the way through to the validation, which is made, and at that point in time, the president is going to have to acknowledge that there is a request for recount, that the seating of board candidates who are winners on the validated results is suspended. And I'm calling a board meeting to consider, special board meeting to consider the recount request. That would be the process that you're going to have to go through. in my view. You've got to recognize validated results before you can go further. Now, if there's no quorum, then you kick it further to the board, and it's the same thing. Validated results, then the president must for the record recognize the request for recount, suspension of the seating of candidates or who were winning candidates, and proceed with a special meeting to consider the request for recount. Let me go. If we want to stop there, fine.
No, I think that makes sense, because if you're saying I want to recount what? Well,
Yeah.
recount of the vote. Well, the vote has to first be announced, formally announced, the results. Now you have something to complain about. Prior to it being formally announced, you don't technically have anything to complain about yet.
Right, yeah, and formally announced means in a recognized meeting that
Right.
has
For that
formal
purpose.
records, association
Right,
permanent records.
right. Well, that makes sense.
All right, let me keep going here and then I'll. Yeah, okay, in here, we go from a director who is a candidate. Can't request he can request a recount, but cannot participate in a resolution of what to do about the recount. We don't,
Has to
in here,
recuse.
we don't recognize that, clearly recognize that there has to be a special board meeting to consider the request for recount. That's not, you don't clearly have that in this 2 and 3, between 2 and 3, or 1, 2, and 3. You don't have a clear recognition that there has to be a suspension of the implementation of the results and a decision as to whether to go forward with a recount. It just simply says the board will request the elections committee chair to conduct the recount. Well, somewhere in there, you've got to decide whether you're going to have a recount.
Well, why, so I hear you saying that, but what's the mandate for having this special meeting to determine if you're going to act on this request?
I think the board can act. The annual meeting is not a board meeting to begin with. Number one, you gotta have a board meeting for the board to act. The board can't resolve without having a meeting.
Okay, so this task in here of the board tasking the elections committee to do this, that tasking would have to be at a board meeting.
Yeah, and that's not clearly stated.
Oh, I got you. Okay,
Yeah, all right, let me keep going here.
that makes sense.
We might be here late.
We already are.
I got a hard stop at 15 minutes ago.
Well, now we're even. We started
We
late.
start 10 minutes late, so.
I'll stop.
I gave you till-
You can lock the door behind.
Keep going.
Uh,
It's important.
okay. A request for recount, there's all kinds of other information that maybe you can put in there, but at a minimum, you need the board that has to state how the recount is to be performed. For example, the last fall, disregarding all of the issues and problems and whatever that occurred, the original count came up from scanning. The recount was done manually. I don't know, I don't recall how that was specified to be done. But when you're gonna have a recount, the board should specify how the recount is going to be done. And there could be other information that the board has to specify. When no later than such and such a date and time do you have the committee, you have to have it done by then. There's another, say, requirement to make, not requirement, but something the board may want to or should specify. But at a minimum, the board needs to specify how that recount is going to be done.
And when it needs to be done by.
And I would say that too, but whatever else will go in there,
I think that's a good point.
A bit about the elections committee doing something that's coming up too. Okay, in 4, it says, it's talking about the elections scheduling a meeting and that sort of thing. I guess it's talking about a schedule a committee meeting to do the recount. I'm not really sure how to read that.
You are talking about number 7?
4. So the election committee chair shall schedule election committee meeting, including election committee members. I guess it, including the contractor operating the scanner and the association staff is needed. What's this as if it's going to be a recount by the elections committee itself? That's not necessarily going to be the case in like this year. Unless the board is going to direct that the ballots be returned to Ocean Pines and the committee do the recount. And then recount by what method, I don't know.
Yeah, the whole paragraph 4 seems useless.
It needs to be reworked at minimum.
Well, I don't see what the value of it is. It basically says, the 3 says we're gonna task the elections committee to do this. And 4 says the elections committee is gonna schedule a meeting. Okay, meeting's gonna be on the day of the annual meeting, okay, or as soon as possible thereafter.
That
Elections committee,
that's
wrong.
wrong.
The annual.
You can't do it at the annual.
Can't meet on the date of the annual. meeting.
Yeah, so I mean, 4 is just a mess.
Well, it all gets rolled into 3. If the board decides that a recount's to be done, the board's gonna have to give some pretty explicit detail.
Right.
Well, what is the requirement on the person challenging the vote to meet a standard for requesting a recount?
Okay, I was gonna leave that to last.
That must be the ugliest part of the,
No,
No, it's question, it's all valid.
ugly. Can we hold
I
that?
mean, the fact that you were leaving it till last.
No, it's because
It's in
it's
sequence.
not considered here. It's one of the things that needs to be considered.
Right.
All right, can I move on here? Not here till midnight. In 6, it says the results will be communicated, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, the only thing it says is it goes to the president, that's gonna be posted in the window, I guess, out here. It really should go, you can post it out here, fine, but it needs to go on the association media, the website.
Yeah,
As well as however the public relations department makes a general
Press
press
release.
release. Yeah. And that's just adding to what's there, kind of a suggestion, I think, but now moving right along, I've got notes over here, I'm going off my marked up copy, so I don't.
I hope
Yeah,
someone's
so-
taking notes, because someone.
I write,
Send.
I'm trying to write some of this stuff down. This is on your copy. I'm trying to write some of the stuff down.
can Augie even hear us?
Does Augie even want to hear us?
I'm taking notes.
Is this one they want back right away?
No, you can keep it.
No, I mean, is
They're
this one
one
the board
man.
wants back right away? Because we may need another session to clean this up and write all,
Oh,
we're not gonna be able to.
Oh, I will almost guarantee you this will be up for a second reading next week.
Okay, and if
I
they,
can see,
If they
we're
wanna-
gonna try and push this.
So this is gonna have to be rewritten.
if the board wants to approve this as is,
Yeah, that's,
good luck. The board, 7 says the board will hold a special meeting no sooner than 3 days after the completion of the recount, but as soon as possible. What's this no sooner than? It should be no later than.
Right.
Whatever you want to pick, no later than 3 days, no later than 5.
Well, because it sounds contradictory. No sooner than, but as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you could do it in 2 days, you're not allowed though, because they said, sooner than 3
It should
days.
be a no later than something.
Why would you say that anyway? Why would you say 3 days has to pass? Almost sounds like a religious thing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's a notification that, hey,
Salt, pepper,
they
right?
have to, I could see
Give it
where,
time.
I can say that it's even,
where you have to, it's for transparency to say, we're having a special meeting on, and you
Yeah.
gotta give your public the notice that in 3 days, we're going to be having a special meeting in case they wanna, but have those special
But you
meetings
still,
closed.
not strike sooner, no later than, is really what you.
Yeah,
Or as soon as possible, they can do it sooner than they
Right,
can.
but you're,
but you gotta have something, we're talking about finishing the
I
election.
mean,
Yeah.
You can't keep
Pushing along.
putting it out there. Okay, number 8. This is where, this is where I first focused on this draft. And it comes down here and it says, committee chair designated shall attend the special board meeting and present the results of the recount for acceptance / validation by the board. That's a complete conflict with what we've talked about should be in M06 now about validation. That the validation is accomplished by presentation of the results by the election committee representative. That provision for present results should be the same thing as is in 11B. However you want to word that. 11B says the presentation by the committee of the results is the validation required by the bylaws. Same thing should be there. And it should need only refer back to 11B of attachment A. Again, the point is that acceptance / validation, there's no acceptance in the bylaws. Acceptance / by the board does not belong there.
Okay.
Now,
My question is. The election committee undertakes this recount. Really, it sounds like what they're saying is the election committee chair shall present to the board the results of the recount.
yeah, that's
Right.
That's what it did, yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Now, but the question then comes up in my mind. Oh, you're saying strike acceptance, okay.
Right.
So the recount. The validation of the recount is consistent with the language in 11B.
11B.
Okay. Is the board then required just to accept it as is?
No different than this. The process should be no different in the situation in which there's not been a quorum at the annual meeting. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's a recount, yes, but it's the same thing. And as a matter of fact, it goes on here in 9, which I agree with fully. The results are final. The recount is the final count. That's it. End of the game.
Okay.
Now, where in 9, I again, this is personal preference of kind of wording. It says, and the winning candidates will begin the process of joining the board. Well, the winning candidates are now members of the board of directors, are not in the process. The validation, you're in. You get up, sit down at the board table.
Okay, so you leave the kiddie table on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Okay.
Again, that's personal,
Yeah.
personal wording. Okay, now let's get back to the end of the story here.
So just before I move on, so the way 8 would read is the election committee chairperson or their designee will attend a special board meeting and present the results of the recount to the board, period.
Does that,
Well,
does that capture the?
then I would add the sentence from 11B, the act of presenting
Yeah,
the election
I gotta
results
look,
will
gotta
accomplish the
Validation, validation will be in accordance with 11B.
Or you could add in that final sentence.
No?
I think Augie's saying add in the final sentence.
Oh, the election
I would
results will then be
just-
final? Oh,
Well,
I got you. Yeah.
That consists of the.
Let's go into 11B.
How you can. Okay, how we, you could, there's the 11A and 11B have the added sentence of what the validation means.
Yeah,
You can just add in that same,
yeah, just in the same sentence, okay.
where.
Yeah, it's,
Instead of referring back.
the act of presenting the election results will accomplish the validation required by bylaws 4.02A.
Yeah, instead of just referring to
That, that's gotta
11B.
be added.
Yeah,
Okay,
use that sentence instead of referring back to.
yeah,
another
just
date.
add that sentence in its entirety.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
All right, two things about recounts. One is that, what Steve mentioned, should there be in here some kind of limitation on when a recount can be requested? I'm going by memory now. For example, in public elections, in the Maryland Code, the difference to accept for there to be a recount, the gap between the winner and the loser, and we're talking about a two-person race in this case. The gap between a winner and loser cannot be more than 5% of the total votes for that position. 5% of the votes of A plus B. If the gap between B, the loser, and A, the winner, is greater than 5%, there's no request in the public law is called petition. Please don't use that in this process. The petition
That's
is
a whole other
something
issue,
else, a
yeah.
whole other thing, yeah. Well, again, the question is, should there be some kind of a provision like that? And
Agreed.
how to calculate, that's another question. I understand that. But I think there should be. Personally, I think there should be, but that's a question. And the other thing, this is kind of a secondary thing to bring up. But the other is there should be a recount provision. The recount provision should be applicable to referendums as well. Referendums and the voting on referendums, it's not really covered in any great detail at all in the bylaws, and the election process is not covered in any great detail in the bylaws, but whatever there is, 100 words at most that really tell you anything about the process. And we've got N06, it's 13, 14 pages because of that, and growing. But referendums should also be subject to the recount provision. And the reason why I say that, I can't go back any further than the time of being a member and resident here in Ocean Pines. And as a matter of fact, the referendum involved ended. The vote may have been announced, the initial vote announcement may have been almost literally the day we settled. In 2002, there was the what is now the Triple Crown Estates annexation referendum.
Yeah.
And out of approximately 5,200 votes, yes and no, the margin between yes, the winning, and no, the losing, was in single digits. And a recount was called. And in the bylaws, there was no recount provision at that time. And I think the recount provision now in the bylaws is a result of the fact that there wasn't, they apparently winged it at that time in the recount of that referendum. That referendum was called for, a recount was called for by the board, and results again were brought back to the board. There was maybe 3 or 4 votes more yes, and maybe 1 more no, and it may have been out of single digits at that point in time, but it was still no more than 10-12 on a recount, was no more than 10-12 vote difference between the two. But the only recount, at least in the last 20 plus years, it has ever been considered in my experience, was in a referendum. So this should also be applied to referendums. But I think you can do that without, again, we don't, in the bylaws, we don't hardly discuss, we vote on referendums, yeah, but what, how you do it, that's another thing. In fact, we put in a special B attachment to cover referendums, in particular referendums for the so-called standalone kind. But it's okay. In addition, we're all rattle along. The other 2 issues are, 1, criteria for a recount, and 2 should be applicable to referendums. And it could be other stuff in the recount criteria than simply the number of votes. But that's really the basic in public law, so I don't see why it should be any different here.
Just curious if most of our elections, well, I should say, at least some of our elections are not, a 2-person race. I mean, we normally have at least 2, sometimes 3 board vacancies to fill.
It's a 2-person race about 10 years ago.
Yeah. But the discrepancy that would, in theory, trigger a recount more often than not is between the last person who obtains the board seat and the person right below them.
Mm.
But in theory, there are people
Yeah.
below them who might also feel injured or whatever in a recount. And frankly, if the recount is done, it might expand beyond just the second and third or third and fourth finishers.
Could easily affect second and third.
Well,
I mean,
once you're on the board, it doesn't make a difference whether you finish first, second, or third in that race. Although
Yeah.
historically, people will refer to it, but you're on the board, you're on the board.
Right, no,
But,
I agree with that.
but-
Filling a vacancy,
but what I'm sorry,
it could feel like filling a Frank Daly vacancy, it could make a difference. The third, presumably there's gonna be three vacancies.
there are gonna be, we're filling 3 vacancies this year.
Third one would be a daily vacancy,
Right.
which is a shorter term.
It's only one.
Oh, I
year.
agree with that. But whoever fills that vacancy's got to run again the next year or doesn't run, in which case it's an open seat.
Well,
But if there's a close race between second and third, that it's so close, that person may want to recount because it's a 3-year term rather than a 1-year term.
Well, that's true also. So
That's-
the question then comes, it seems to me, we have to identify a standard by which any candidate can seek a recount. Regardless of whether you win or lose, in
No.
theory.
I have difficulty going away from any other standard that would be what's the maximum gap? Am I saying that right? Yeah, the gap between the lowest
Winner.
winner and
The highest loser.
anybody else below that.
Okay,
Because if you're gonna have a 4-person race and 2 vacancies.
Right.
As I think as Steve indicated, numbers 3 and 4 could be very close together
Right.
and close enough together to be within a gap up to number 2. I'm staying with the gap. Anybody,
So in other words, the lowest winner would need to win by X percentage points from anyone else,
that's right.
in order to not be a recount consideration.
That's right.
But,
And
okay.
when we say percentage, I want to be careful of that. You have to identify.
Number,
You
yeah,
have to figure out a way to identify the gap.
right,
Right.
so
X.
so, I mean, for argument's sake, last year's election, we filled 3 vacancies. But there were 3, there were 6 candidates altogether, right? So any one of the 3 who lost could, in theory, we could request a recount if they met whatever that numerical
Percentage.
standard is.
Is that we don't have a standard.
Right, and I understand that. And what I'm trying to get at is, are we talking about the gap between 3 and 4, for argument's sake? The gap is a percentage of the total votes cast, or is the percentage within 5%, let's say, of the gap between 3 and 4. Because, and the reason why I'm asking is since we have multiple candidate ballots, you know, some people will cast a ballot for all 3 vacancies. But
Right,
some only cast for 2 or 1.
right.
So the gap has to be, it seems to me, between, you could say, pick a percentage, I think. You know, 5%, if that's what's in the Maryland law, but it has to be 5% of the votes, the separation between 3 and 4. Not the total number of ballots cast or votes cast.
Well, the problem with that is you have 10 votes and it's 5%. 5% of 10 is half a vote. You round it up to 1 vote. I mean, that's an awful small number.
Well, but if the number 3 person gets, pick a number, 100 votes. And the number 4 person gets 80 votes. So the gap between them is 20 votes.
Yeah.
Okay, if the cutoff point is 5%. It's 5% of what? Of 20? Because that's the gap between them, right?
I wouldn't do that.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't know.
One-
Go ahead.
What, this is not as elegant, but we sort of know how many houses there are in Ocean Pines, so you might just say like 100 within 50 votes of the person who is seated. You can ask for a recount or some number that seems not too
Well, yeah,
high.
and we could probably even go further than that because we know historically about how many households vote. So
Right.
it's about 40%.
No, it's around, it's a little less than 40%
Last 3.
on the best case.
The best case for board of director votes, best case has been about 40%.
Yeah, I looked up the last 3 last night, and all 3 were less than 40. The 30s.
40 is a good
And,
number.
by the way, everybody made a big deal of the fact, as I recall, that there were more, that there was more ballots were cast, I believe was the way it was phrased, in the election 2 years ago than in the election last year. And of course, the reason why there's a lot more controversy in the election 2 years ago. I don't know.
We need a statistician.
Yeah, I don't know.
We need a,
Yeah,
we need a number
I just-
person.
Yeah. Well,
if we can't really count on past history, because particularly because of this year with a contractor, I mean, my view, and I'm in the minority, I get that, but my view is we probably will have a smaller pool of ballots to be cast because of the way we're dealing with the election.
right,
And I mean, the example, for argument's sake, I gave UPS, even if you send something overnight and the cutoff date was at 4 o'clock, well, if it's 4 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, if that means it's gotta be 1 o'clock Pacific time, and if they get them at 2 o'clock, they're not gonna be counted. I mean, that's the sort of the problem we're looking at. So I'm reluctant to rely on that sort of, you know, past history or total
Yeah.
number of houses or anything like that.
and if they,
And I don't know the answer. I'm just sort of throwing it out there.
but if they don't
The
live in
Maryland-
Ocean Pines,
The Maryland law says it's the difference between the 2 candidates is greater than 5% of the votes cast for those 2 candidates. So maybe that's how you do it. It's
So it's the
5%
two
of the
candidates,
person,
you
last
add the 2
person.
votes together?
Votes cast for those 2
I mean,
candidates. That's what
So
you said,
the
Augie?
last person who gets seated and the first person who's disappointed, you add those votes together and the difference would have to be less than 5%.
5%, in my example of 180, 100 votes for the winner, 80 votes for the loser.
So 5% of 180.
180, the gap between the 2, that's what we're saying, the gap between the 2
Has to be greater
greater than,
No, what's
no,
that?
less
less than
less
5
than 5%.
in order to request a recount. If the gap is greater than 5%, then we would consider it valid.
Yeah, it's SOL. That actually sort of makes sense.
I mean, it sounds as good as anything, right?
Yeah,
A couple of comments. One, I don't think we can exclude any candidate that's within the gap, if a gap is established. You have 6 candidates, and if 4, 5, and 6 are all within the gap, any one of them can request
Yeah,
But the
I
gap
think you're right.
between, and if you're talking about the lowest winner and the first loser, you add those two together. So we're at 180 votes. Anyone who finished in the losing category could request the recount if you're less than 5%. Right?
That's my view. I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
have a problem.
I'm not sure. Okay, again, I'm saying that if you're gonna establish a gap,
That'd be 4
that
votes.
you have to be within to be able to request a recount, as long as you're within the gap, even if you're number 6 in the count, if you're in the gap, you can request it.
That seems
But
like,
the number 6 guy may not be in the gap. That's what I'm saying.
I'm agreeing.
I would, suggest that this is not for us to solve. We're not the elections committee, we're not the board, we're not a bunch of math majors. It's a valid concern that there's no criteria. Right, and I don't think this committee is the one that's supposed to.
That was my reason for bringing it.
Yeah, so it's absolutely valid, and I think our feedback is there's no criteria, and somebody needs to figure that out.
It's valid, but if you do a recount and you recount all the ballots, the first place person could come out third. And somebody else could move
So
on
it's-
because there's an error in the
I
recount.
think it's kind of like the other issue where we provide feedback. This is what you gave us to look at.
Yeah,
We've got some edits on here, and we've also got questions.
yeah.
And some of the edits are easy, some of the edits are a little bit more difficult, but the questions are really the issue.
Okay, well,
Who's,
send me the edits and send me the questions. I'll put something in an email.
Is there, I can clean this up. I stole your
Yeah,
paper copy,
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
if I can get the Word version of this,
Okay,
I will clean this up, the things that we talked about here.
what is it that you have then?
I have I have this thing.
From the May meeting, all right, I can extract it and I'll send it to.
Or was that, or is that already in the material?
It's
It's in the board packet.
it was in the board packet, which I have here, but I can pull out just that part of it and send just that.
Yeah, send me this. I will clean up my notes here. I will send it back to you, the committee. And then we can say that this is our feedback. And we'll, no, and let me,
That's the whole package you probably.
Keith,
need.
let me have it. I just want to take.
let me have,
You
yeah,
have-
let me have that too.
There you go.
Yeah.
that back. I took this first reading. I took
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And then I'll clean this up, send this back. I'll, again, I'll edit the things that are relatively simple to edit. And then at the end of it, I will put remaining questions related to.
Yeah, and there has to be some sort of standard for.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm gonna say is.
And I can do this pretty quick.
Okay.
I'll do this weekend.
can I flag one thing on the timing? And 11C right now says the request may be at the annual meeting. So that's got to be fixed if the resolution is before the annual meeting.
You're looking,
And one solution might be just to replace 11C with this new procedure, because this is the recount procedure that is.
Oh, I think I know what you're saying.
06.
11, a candidate may request a recount at the annual meeting.
Yeah, that would have to be deleted. Wherever
And
it
again,
goes.
If you replace 11C with this new procedure, that might answer
And that
the,
explains it, yeah.
and give us a place to put this.
Yeah.
That makes
Well,
sense.
I mean, there's a procedure for.
But that,
Time votes.
that 11C has to be.
It's a game of chance, but there's a procedure in 12 for time votes.
You leave the tie vote part in, but then take out the recount part. That has to be done. Wherever the proposal goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so does that make
Can you
sense, Keith,
request?
what you're?
Yeah, because it says,
Wouldn't the answer be, excuse me for just one second? On your thoughts as nice as well. Wouldn't the answer be to strike C 11C, create a new 12 entitled recount request and procedures, and then renumber 12 as 13 and tie votes?
That makes sense too.
Question.
And I would say, if
And
you're
then you can
striking
put everything
11C,
in there.
I
And I
would
think that,
retain the
the end
second
of it.
sentence of 11C and put it in this new procedure somewhere, because that seems important.
Well, they can't make the request at the annual meeting because
The second, excuse me, Keith, the second sentence of 11C, I wouldn't strike that. I
Oh.
would put that in somewhere that says the board is
Yeah, yeah.
responsible.
Part, yeah,
Right, I got you.
Well, actually, that should probably be
start it.
that should maybe the first sentence. Notice the board is responsible for resolving any request for a
Correct.
recount.
Correct.
And then the second
What
sentence,
constitutes a recount?
a candidate may request a recount
Right.
prior to or prior to the annual meeting coming to order, which is, I think, what you said
That's what
initially.
I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I still have one question on the tie vote. If it's tied, can you request a recount?
Yes,
Because the count could be wrong. When it's tie, if you can have 5% variance or whatever that number is for a recount, you tell me it's tie, I want a recount. Then the drawing of the cards after a recount
Although,
makes sense.
If you look at 12 under tie votes, it does not indicate that you
Yeah.
do that. It only says it's the game of chance.
Well, in other words, what tie vote, it would say a tie vote as a result of a recount
Right, that's different.
would be resolved by.
Right, that makes sense.
So we do the recount and it's still a tie.
It's still a tie, right?
Yeah.
That should be there.
A tie as a result of a
Yeah,
recount.
I don't think there's ever been a tie in the 20 years I've been here. Have you,
But
Steve?
we're gonna be prepared.
Jim, have
A
you?
tie as
No, I don't
a
think so.
result.
But there's been a lot of close ones.
Yeah.
And this last election is probably the worst because the recount didn't match the first count.
Yeah, by the way, for what it's worth, and I'm not sure I've run long, but I'll just make the
Yeah,
observation.
my hard stop was 45 minutes,
Yeah, well,
48 minutes
We
ago.
started 10 minutes.
10 minutes cost us 45.
If we go back to electronic voting as a part of the voting process,
Right.
the first shout everybody has is that there's no paper trail for electronic voting, which is true because it's electronic,
Right.
but there should be some way to audit. And again, electronic voting may not be involved in this because we're not doing electronic voting this year. But maybe it's something we can put off onto the elections committee for the future, but that's
It
the
needs-
way we're describing this right now. We do not capture electronic voting. That's all.
But- If you stop and look at
Yeah,
it,
I totally get you there.
AT&T and all the major stockholders have done electronic voting for the last 20 years, either by telephone or and they create an audit trail from the computer.
Well, and
So
also,
it's there.
all
There is a
stock,
difference between a counting papers manually
Right.
and an audit trail. I don't disagree with
No.
you, but the whole discussion about electronic voting
Is a,
from the last year's election, in part, and fomented by some who will remain nameless, is that there is no paper trail for electronic voting.
but you could print a paper trail. The computer,
Those who do not agree with you would say that's not the same thing, but I'm with you. I'm just telling you what we
well,
have.
if you've accepted it electronically, it creates a paper trail in the
yeah,
computer.
but the argument is,
Go ahead.
if you give me a paper ballot and I fill it out and I stick it in an envelope and I mail it to you.
Yeah.
That came from me and you can prove it came from me because I mailed it to you.
Right.
When you go into an electronic system and you print it out, there's no way to prove that thing you printed out
You
came
were
from
the
me.
one-
But now
You
unless,
an IP address of my
No,
computer.
Because
I understand
it's
that,
not a
argument,
computer line, shit in, shit out,
Right,
okay?
yeah.
but
I mean, that's the argument.
the other argument is that if I mail it, I never know if it got there.
That's a loss though, not a gain. If we're arguing about a gain, there's extra votes in there. How do I know these came from these people?
It's not just that, in our elections, there's at least if you believe what at least some people are saying, is there's no way to track the envelope going back to the tabulator. In other words, some say there's a code on there, others say, no, it just shows where it came from. It doesn't say who the person is who voted. I'm just saying, there's a lot of ifs here.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is gonna be the best craft we're gonna get
Somebody
now.
collects your mail out of your mailbox and
Well-
send it in.
I've seen some
That's
comments
too.
too, lately, but now that we have an additional vacancy that has just happened on the board of directors, versus the original two candidates we were going to be filling, right, during this election process. Are they using election results to fill, Mr. Daly's spot? Or
Yeah,
are they?
Yes.
the board is not gonna name a temporary fill-in. The
Yeah.
ballots have not yet been put, or
because
as of his
it-
resignation.
Because it does state, our bylaws do state how to fill a vacancy, and I don't,
But it's gotta be within a
hold on.
period of
The
time.
filling of the vacancy by the board is discretionary within the time
Right.
frames that we're living with right now. And the board has decided not to fill the vacancy.
Because we're so close to the election.
Right.
Yeah.
So the ballots had not yet been printed at the time of the resignation. So the ballots will now have 3 vacancies. The third place finisher will have a 1-year term. That's sort of where we are. at this point.
Right, and that makes sense.
The cutoff is 90 days. Outside greater than 90-day vacancy, the board must,
Right, and we're inside the 90 days.
inside the 90 days, the board
Has some
can
discretion, and we're not gonna do it.
discretionary. After the ballots are printed, there is no discretionary. You can't,
Right,
Right.
the board cannot fill.
right. That's where we
You
are.
have to wait until after the new
To
board is
fill it,
elected.
Right. And that's where-
all right, so. Do you want to go over the governance document, or do you want to leave it as is and we will do, update it and go over it all at the next meeting, or what do you want to do?
Well, there would only be really 2 updates to it. There's no new overdues.
Okay.
And there would only be 2 updates, which are basically the 2 issues that we talked about here
Right.
today.
So it doesn't,
Yeah,
it's a moot point right now.
yeah.
Okay,
There's one that has gone, the issue of the certifying that they can do association meetings electronically has gone to the GM to see what, so that one's been tabled. But I think all of the backlog resolutions are done.
Yeah,
all right. So last question
At
for
least
today. Last question for today is, or a notification is that our next meeting, the last one I have scheduled for in here, is Friday, July 7th. From 1 to 3, again, hybrid as usual. Is there any conflicts with the July 7th one, or do you want to?
7. I am almost positive I have a conflict with that. That's an ugly week for me. July 7th, I can't do July, I won't even be here July 7th, and I won't be available to call in either.
Okay.
So how about July 14th?
yeah,
I won't be able to join on the 14th, but that's okay with me. I will be in Africa.
Well, now, wait a minute. You can't miss a meeting, because how else will we have good minutes, And why are you going to Africa? Is it for
I'm
work or
taking,
for
taking
fun?
my dad on a safari.
Oh,
wow.
that's
Good
cool.
for you.
Nice.
Very fun. Okay, can you take lots of pictures? Because I will never make it to Africa, so I can live vicariously through that.
I'll
Okay?
take some pictures.
Gee, first Kansas and then Africa. You're a globetrotter.
Well, does it have to be on a Friday?
Not necessarily, no. Mondays or Fridays are better for me during the summer, though.
What's the board meeting is the 15th, so unless we have something that's gonna affect the board meeting,
15. Do you want to?
and I can't do it the week before.
Well, what about the 30th? What if we go early and do it the 30th?
I can't make the 30th. I got some
You mean like the
medical
28th
issues
of
coming up and
July?
it won't be available on the
You
30th.
mean-
I plan on having a heart attack.
No.
Do you mean like the 28th of July? Cause that's a.
No, I was talking about June. I was
Oh,
talking about
June.
Yeah, but if Bob can't be here, then,
I definitely can't make that. I got some surgery scheduled.
and I can't do the 21st. I mean, the next available Friday for me would be the 28th.
So it's after the directors, July meeting. Is that fine for this time or?
Well, if I edit this stuff up, I mean, this is, it sounds to me like this is the big deal here.
Right,
So if I get this cleaned up,
and we're
Yeah.
aiming to have that for the June meeting, right?
well, I will do that this weekend.
Yeah.
So then he'll have that for the June meeting.
Mhm.
And then he has our feedback, our official feedback on the other one. We
Right.
really don't have any other pressing issues for this upcoming board meeting.
For the July directors
Right.
meeting that we need to make sure we deal with. Do you want to skip July then? We typically also, because I don't check with Jim here, we usually don't have an August meeting because of the annual meeting and all that stuff. There's not, gonna be a change in board, but I am going to need to think about submitting request dates for this room for like September through December, because I don't have those booked yet. And again, I
Well, then
got,
why don't we do the July 20? I mean, is anybody else not available on July 28th?
I could do July 28th.
It'll be after the board meeting.
Yeah.
We can find out what happened, we can talk about what happened at the board meeting. I mean, the board may kick all this stuff back to us and say, okay, give us something,
Yeah.
clean, or the elections committee, may send it to elections committee and say, you need to answer some of these questions.
Okay.
28th will work for me.
Works for
Augie?
me. Works for me. I'm, I
So, okay. All right.
Mr.
Okay,
Representative,
so
think I'll be there in
I
person that
will,
day.
I
Worst
will,
comes to worst, I'll do it remotely, I guess.
okay, so I will email Michelle though and CC you, Steve, because we'll need to, take July 7th off of the Teams links, for
Right.
them and get her to do one for the 28th.
Okay.
Of July. And then I know typically is Friday still, do you think Fridays is still gonna be good for y'all in the fall, like
Yeah.
when we kick back
For
in?
me, yes.
yeah,
Um,
my turn.
I know we won't know exactly when the new.
My term is
directors
up.
pick their regular
Sometime in
meetings,
September,
but
October.
we can,
Jim, you can fill it.
it's typically the second Friday
You don't
still
have to
pretty
be
decent.
fair. You can just fill it.
for everybody. If I try and at least put in,
We used to do the second Friday of every month.
so.
That's what we used to do.
Cause I wanna work up, I wanna
Yeah.
get those submitted so that we can clean the room when we need it.
Yeah.
So, alright, so-
Well, Bob, you're just gonna end up moving over there next to Jim.
I can do that. but
Wait,
He's got 3 times the knowledge that I do.
Yeah, but what else are you gonna do on a Friday? afternoon?
That might be a.
I have no problem stopping by.
after Labor Day, I don't have the summer job, so then I become a lot more flexible on what
Okay.
days.
Well, look, the board's supposed to meet right now, third Saturday of every month.
So,
So if you want to lay in the
with
second
that.
Friday of every month, go ahead, and if we have to make a change,
Then we can- we'll adjust it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I just wanna get something on the books.
Yeah,
I think that's why we
sooner
had
rather
it
than
that way.
later.
yeah, we want to be in front of the board.
Yeah, I think that's why we had it that way. Yeah.
Right, okay. All right,
Motion to adjourn.
yeah, thank you.
Second,
Thank you. All in favor of
Yeah.
adjourning at 4:04 PM.
I.
All right, you got it.
Have a wonderful.
Don't hold me up any longer.
Have a great weekend, everyone.